live feed. I think I said 8th of wishful thinking. I think I said 8th of August. Anyway, it's Wednesday, the 7th of August, 2024. It is the sort of period after the Belgian Grand Prix. It's the August break. It's the period leading up to the start of the second half of the season with the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, of course. So that's going to be a little bit of a talking point. But yeah, I think we've got a great show for you today. I've actually packaged a section, which I haven't decided where I'm going to put yet. Depends how your questions and answers go. Well, how my answers go, more to the point, I think. So we'll do that at some point. We'll get that into the show. But with no more ado, let's start with some questions. So let me just get organised here, as ever. Having started, you get the thing live, and then you have to work on everything else. Where is this thing? Here we go. So first question is from Marina Nora Rodriguez Ruiz. I think we've had you before. Great name. Thank you very much, Marina. Hi, Peter. Do you think it's true what they say that Adrian is already signed for Aston? So sad. I was really hoping he would come to Ferrari. Thank you. Well, I don't know. At the risk of wishing that Adrian Newey didn't watch this show and get the idea of going to Aston in the first place, which is something I mentioned a while ago, is that the shopping list of Lawrence Stroll for sure has Adrian Newey absolute number one critical item to obtain, to basically to stop him going anywhere else like McLaren or Ferrari or Mercedes. But, and I said, there's so much synergy there in terms of the road car staff and unlimited amounts of money that there was a very good chance that he would go to Aston, and we should all be ready for the shock of that. And I think the time has come to say that looks as if it's going to happen. Very sad. Not sad for Fernando Alonso, of course, and Alonso fans of the world. It's a good thing. Bear in mind, of course, that by the time Adrian's 26 cars on stream, Fernando will be, 45, I think. And it's not to say that Fernando won't continue to race through to the level of Luigi Fagioli, who embraced pre and post-war and won Grand Prix, both pre and post-war. Or indeed, Juan Manuel Fangio. It wasn't exactly a spring chicken. And then Fernando could go on race forever, until he's 60 or something, who knows. But the general wisdom in Formula One is that, 45 is pushing it a bit, probably, in terms of being at your absolute peak. But anyway, it's good news for Fernando, I guess. He just wishes he was 10 years younger, I suspect. But, for the rest of it, I don't know. I'm like you. I'm totally with you, Marina. I just feel very unsettled by the whole thing. I felt unsettled by so many things this year. Carlos Sainz getting sacked by Ferrari and a few other things that have happened, management stuff, and now this. It's like, I don't know what it's like, going to McDonald's, ordering your Big Mac, and then bringing in a €15,000 bottle of Lafite Rothschild and drinking that with your Big Mac. I mean, it's just such a sad thing if he goes there, I think. There's nothing really. I don't want to be too unkind to them because I've got some good friends at Aston, but I don't know, the way it's run, the money thing, the whole deal with the Strolls, it's just going to be, get ready for Lance Stroll to win Grand Prix, I suppose, is what all we can do and say. So why isn't he going to Ferrari? Well, as predicted, Ferrari need him. They should be paying through the nose for him, but Freddie Vasseur is not a walkover, and he has his own ideas on things, obviously. And it's interesting that he's currently involved in some of the engineering of the car as well. And I can imagine Adrian would have wanted total control of everything, the who's hired and fired, how it's done, entire rejigging of the drawing office. Just before we go any further, I'm just going to make sure that we are live, because I've had these things before. Yeah, it looks as if it's working. Wow. And I, Ferrari probably said, well, no, we're not going to give you all that control. And anyway, we are an Italian company subject to Italian union laws, and we can't just allow you to hire and fire at will because there will be huge union considerations. So, they probably said, okay, forget it. And I think the biggest thing here, to be honest, is why he's not going to McLaren, because you would imagine that Zach Brown going after everything that he can get that works and is logical in racing, you would imagine that Adrian would be number one on his shopping list as well. And maybe he is, and maybe he just realizes he's never going to be able to outbid Lawrence Stroll, which is, surprising, because he does have quite serious Bahraini backers, doesn't he, or shareholders. So that's the curious one for me, why Adrian, and also from an Adrian's point of view, why he wouldn't prefer to go to McLaren than go and work for the Strolls. That's another odd one, because he'd be so at home at McLaren, wouldn't he? Cool team, or great love of historic racing cars between Zach and Adrian, and they've got a massive ownership of cars as well. And then lots of GT racing stuff that Harry could get involved with, Harry Newey, and it just seemed like there was a whole. It's just a shame if he doesn't go to McLaren, because it looked really good. It looked like the right place for him to be. Not that McLaren in any way need Adrian Newey right now, because they're doing such a good job anyway. It's just that it's better to have Adrian than not have him. And as I said before, if you've got Adrian, he's not waiting for anywhere else either. So it was a bit of a double whammy for anybody that gets him. And I just think it's a sad indictment of Toto Wolff's management, obviously, over the last few years since 2022, that he's not going to Mercedes, because he should be going to Mercedes. If Toto had really done the job, he should be hiring Adrian Newey now to take Mercedes into the next millennium and getting more championships going. And it's, that is, as I say, that's the most outstanding indictment, really, I think, of this whole thing, that Adrian's not really been even considering Mercedes from what we gather. So I think you need to fasten your seatbelts and be ready for an announcement. It's it's going to be pretty sick making, I think, and it's just like hiring one of the world's greatest violinists and having him play with the rock band that you've put together, and it just doesn't feel right to me. What more can I say? Maybe I'm too much of a purist. I'm a massive Adrian fan, as everybody knows. Everybody has to be. You'd be an idiot not to be, given his talent. But I like him as a guy, and I like him for his love of the sport. And I just hate to see his career ending that way. But, money. It's very sad. Anyway, thanks for that question. This is from Sarosh Soman. Hi, Peter. What did you make of Leclerc's race in Spa? I thought he drove well, and especially in the end where he was able to keep Max and Lando at bay. Your thoughts, please? Yeah, no, he did drive well. It's the best race he's had since Monaco, and it was the first time we've seen Charles back where he belongs, really, in that very, very rarefied atmosphere, somewhere near Max and Lewis, and he did the best. He did a great job. He got the best from the car all weekend. I think the disappointing thing was that, given how well Charles was driving, that the Ferrari quite clearly was nowhere near a McLaren, and not really anywhere near a Mercedes, and that's worrying for Ferrari. Well, they've known that, but they've not really known that, because Charles has been having so many problems. He's been driving a difficult car quite badly and not doing a very good job. But it came right at Spa, and that was the first time in a while they've been able to have a true gauge of where that car is. And it's slipped back. It's slipped back in terms of where it was relative to Mercedes and last year and this year, and that's a worry. And whether or not they can suddenly turn things around second half of the year, I very much doubt, given the limitations of budget cap and testing and everything else. So that to me was more significant, that the Ferrari was just not very good. I mean, he was leading the race, for Pete's sake, and then the top speed advantage was massive between Ferrari and Mercedes, and Lewis breezed past with DRS, and then Charles in DRS. Well, he wasn't even DRS. I mean, by the time we got round to the next DRS zone, Lewis was gone. It was just, there were occasions when he was in DRS and he could do nothing about it, and that's a big worry, that Ferrari are in that state. Very big. It was a big surprise to me. I thought they might be able to just hook the car up so that it's got at least reasonable top speed. But in order to get rid of the bouncing, in order to have the car half reasonable through Sector 2, they had to run so much downforce that they just couldn't get the car to work over the lap, and therefore over the race in terms of their nearest competition. And that's a big issue. They need Adrian Newey. Yeah, well, that ain't going to happen now. Just had a nice, I think we've had a super chat in. Yeah, here we go. Let me do it. Yes, thank you very much, from King Elijah. Thank you. Hi, Peter. Can you do a breakdown on Daniel Ricciardo, his driving style? Why is he doing so badly? Does he like under or oversteer? Can he be a Formula One champ? Yeah, It's interesting that you asked that question, isn't it? Because I'm sure most Formula One fans are saying, well, you know, that's the end of Daniel, really. He's not going very well. And Yuki Tsunoda looks reasonably consistently able to score more points than Daniel, let's put it that way. Daniel is, he's certainly got the level of touch and feel. And I know I keep going on about that, but it is absolutely critical when analysing a driver's talent, I think. Not talent, but the way he drives. His style, I suppose, is the right word. It's a bit overused, but let's use that word. I think he has the touch and feel, at least to the level of Lando Norris. And which means that he's very soft with his inputs. He's very, very good. There's nothing spiky about the way Daniel Ricciardo drives. I think, like Lando, his corners are slightly longer than they should be. So I'm getting around to saying I think he's very near Lando in the way he drives. He's got the touch. His corners are a bit long relative to Lewis and Max, but he's got a lot of very good other qualities. I think his personality and his demeanor and his psyche are very strong. Let's put aside the decision to leave Red Bull and go to Renault for big money because he didn't want to face Max anymore. Let's put that to one side. But just talk about him in general. And he's got this very even keel, which is very good. He's very competitive, and he's got a very good eye for gaps and for feel for gaps in traffic and how to manipulate traffic and judge a race and look at a race. Very, very good. I think his entire system took a massive jolt the day he decided to leave Red Bull. His bank account went up, and I think his feel for racing and driving went down proportionally as a result, because he'd just left the greatest team in Formula One, which wanted to keep him and which would have given him more Grand Prix wins had he stayed. He wouldn't have beaten Max to any of the championships, but he would have won probably by now. I think he probably would have won at least another 8 to 10 races probably since the period he left. So that was always going to be a massive slap in the face for his psyche, psychologically, and he's had to live with that. And I think when he took a few knocks and he's had to stand aside, and now he's come back. I think at the beginning of this year he was kind of back to square one in terms of motivation and in terms of, right, I'm Daniel Ricciardo, I can do this. I've won Grand Prix, I can win World Championships. I've got to fight. I'm going to get back into the Red Bull A team or whatever was in his mind. And I think now the problem is that he's not in Red Bull. He's at whatever it is, Visa Cash App, and that's not the same. If you don't get things absolutely right all the time, the downside is exponentially greater than if you don't get them right at a team as good as Red Bull. And he's got in the other car a very, very fast, reflexy, quite edgy racing driver, Yuki Tsunoda. And that's his benchmark. And I think those two things combined means that there are moments when he's having to push harder than he would want to push as Daniel Ricciardo in his own pace of the weekend. And I think that's affecting his driving a bit, and he's starting to overdrive in those situations and not getting the best from the car. I think when he's got a good weekend and it starts off well on a Friday and he's in rhythm with everything and everything feels good and he feels confident of getting into the top 10 in qualifying, then you're not far away from the Daniel Ricciardo that we used to know and love. But those weekends are few and, dare I say it, far between, sadly. It's so competitive and it's so close in the midfield there, and it's so difficult to get it absolutely right in terms of tyre temperatures, brake temperatures, being out on the track at the right time, particularly when there are red flags or whatever in qualifying. And those things are very, very difficult to manage. So he's under the microscope, he's under a lot of pressure. And I don't think those are the greatest of the two greatest things to see the best of Daniel Ricciardo. Some drivers, like a little bit like Carlos Sainz, respond very well to that. But I don't think that is a good thing for Daniel. And I think what can I say? If Mercedes announced tomorrow that they'd hired Daniel Ricciardo for the next 3 years, they truly believe he was a world championship winner, they're going to have him up there alongside George Russell And the car is really good. I think he could still win a lot of Grand Prix, and I think therefore he could win some championships. I don't think he'd be quite as quick as George, but I think he'd be able, as he would alongside Max, I think he would have supplanted some of the differences with other advantages. And I think he could still do that. But, that's not going to happen, is it? So it would take something totally extreme like that for Daniel. In answer to your final question, can he be a Formula One champ? I think that's the only way it can happen now. Soman asking another question now. Hi Peter, me being from India, I have to ask you your favourite cricketers. Love your show and keeps happening listening to it while negotiating Indian traffic. Well, yeah. I've had massive respect for a lot of Indian cricketers in the past. I chatted to Sachin Tendulkar for a while when he was at the British Grand Prix one year. I think he'd just ordered a Ferrari or something. He was a guest at the Ferrari team. We chatted for a while. And then did we strike up a friendship? I don't think so, because the following European winter I was in Sydney and was at the SCG for the cricket there, and there was a lull, or there was rain or something, and I went round to the Indian dressing room and said, "Oh, it's Peter Windsor here. I met Sachin at the British Grand Prix. I'd love to have a quick chat if he's there." And he didn't come out and he didn't answer it, and so I thought, no, well, better not trouble the great man. No, but I mean, I've had. Yeah, as far as Indian cricketers go, I've loved watching so many of them over the years. But my heart has always been with Australian cricketers. Having said that, great English cricketers are hard to beat, whether it's Colin Cowdrey or David Gower, with cover drives and the purity of their cover drives and the timing of those two particularly. Very, very difficult to beat that. Clive Lloyd, I think I'd put in that bracket too when he was at his peak. But then I grew up in Australia, and I grew up, I think, in the great eras of cricket in Australia when the SCG was empty and I'd be the only guy in the stands for a typical Sheffield Shield match during the holidays. I used to love that. Ever since they've made cricket popular, I haven't enjoyed it as much. I think part of cricket is being in an empty grandstand, isn't it? Isn't that what it's all about? Anyway, I'm being slightly facetious, but yeah, a lot of the great Australian cricketers. A cricketer that probably very few people have ever heard of today, who was one of my idols, right up there with Jim Clark when I was a kid, was Norm O'Neill, who played for Sydney and New South Wales and Australia. Fabulous batsman, just the all-round hero for me. But yeah, Steve Waugh, you can't get much further than Steve Waugh, Michael Clarke, Ricky Ponting. I love that era, the whole Matty Hayden, Justin Langer, Adam Gilchrist. What a time that was. You'll notice that most of the guys I'm selecting are all batsmen rather than batters, I think we have to call them these days, rather than bowlers. So I've always been on that side. When I played cricket at school and I was a batsman. So there we go. Yeah, but love cricket. It's not quite the same anymore, I don't think. I think Pat Cummins is doing a good job. It just doesn't have quite the same feel to it as it used to in the Steve Waugh days, but I suppose nothing ever stays the same, does it? So thank you very much, Sarosh. Very good. Aaron Lee. Hi, Peter. Here's a quote from Lewis from Hungarian Grand Prix qualifying. Could you please give your thoughts? Aaron Lee. The car, is more on a knife edge than ever, and it doesn't like it when you brake late and deep and make a V of it. You have to brake early and run off and roll the speed in, and I hate that. That's just not me. It's not my way of driving. So you have to brake early. Yeah. Well, that's exactly, when he's talking about brake late and make a V of it, that's a short corner. Okay, he's describing it as a V because that's all he's ever probably known it as, and he doesn't listen to me about short corners. Why would he? But I call them short corners because in reality what Lewis is doing when he says he's braking late, what he's doing is extending the straight into a slow rotation point, a slower rotation point than say Carlos Sainz would have, and then getting along a nice extended straight exit as well. So that is what he's saying. The car is on a knife edge. You can't really do that. You can't short corner the car, and indeed you have to brake early and roll the speed in. What he's saying is doing it the way Carlos Sainz does it, having to brake in a straight line. He feels he's braking earlier because the straight's a bit shorter, and then he just has to be very careful about getting the speed absolutely right at the turn-in point, which is a wider turn-in point than he would naturally want to do. And that's just not me. Well, there you go. It's exactly what I've always been saying. He is a short corner driver. And it's very difficult to do that in the Mercedes as it is. It's so knife edgy. Some races he can, but not really. And that's why I've said from day one, somebody asked a question last year, I think, about why Mark Hughes was saying Lewis has got quite a wide entry and he doesn't turn in as early as Max. I said, well, he does. That is his natural thing. But ever since 2022, he hasn't been able to do that. And the only way to get the Mercedes to work is to do a much wider entry and get the tyres right. And it's too knife edgy to try and do short corners. And that is basically confirming everything that I've said about Lewis's style and about the problems he's had ever since 2022. So there you go. If any team needs Adrian Newey, it's Mercedes. Okay, your final point is, I was slightly confused by the quote in the context of usual comments of Lewis's driving style. Is the V he mentioned the same as well? No, it's not. And you might say the same as other drivers who are, Jean Alesi is another good example, Jacques Lafitte are two other that I often mention as classic V drivers. No, Lewis is not a V driver in the way Sebastian Vettel is. But he extends the straights in the way Sebastian Vettel does. What Vettel doesn't have is Lewis's ability to manipulate the car when he's approaching or looking for the appropriate moment to rotate it. And I've often said that is what absolutely encapsulates the brilliance of a Max Verstappen or a Lewis Hamilton or a Charles Leclerc when Charles focused. It's knowing the moment of the least possible downside to rotate the car. And everything they do in the approach to that moment is all to do with manipulation of the brake pedal pressure, the throttle and the steering load. It's not just get down to a slow point. There we are, that's the V, yank on the steering, slow minimum speed, now let's accelerate. It's not that, that's what Vettel does. I'm being slightly brutal about it, but that's basically what Vettel does. No. In that moment, that's where Lewis comes into his own. Vettel definitely has the feel for extending the straights. What he doesn't have, in my opinion, is the feel for how to rotate the car the way Lewis does mid-corner. And that's why he was getting destroyed by Daniel Ricciardo in that last year at Red Bull when they took the downforce out of the back of the car. Because you need that grip level, particularly at the back, to do what a Lewis or a Max does. And without that, Vettel was completely lost. Because that's all he ever knew that's all he does know is that V rotation. And it's, if he doesn't have a back end, he's completely lost. Whereas Lewis can do it, but everything is so knife edgy on the Mercedes at the moment, and it changes from lap to lap. That's what knife edgy means, corner to corner almost. And he can't predict what it's going to do. He can't get any feel through the car. And he probably has to run it stiffer than he wants because it's the only way to get the car to work with the ride height, and he can't get enough feel through it. And so that's exactly what the problem is. But don't confuse Vettel's V, mid-corner V, with a Lewis Hamilton rotation or a Max Verstappen rotation. Completely different things. David B. Which Grand Prix, plural S, but still pronounced Grand Prix, actually, isn't it? Because it's French. So whether it's un Grand Prix or deux, trois, quatre Grand Prix, it's still Grand Prix. Are you looking forward to the most from point of view of the season? I'm interested to see how Ferrari go at Monza. I think that will be, that'll be really interesting because we've got a direct benchmark to last year, obviously, and Singapore, therefore, very good top speed, high speed braking, but, will they be there this year? And it's going to be a great shame if they're not, if Ferrari aren't really good at Monza. So am I looking forward to that? I'm not looking forward to Monza where Ferrari aren't quick, but I am looking forward to seeing if they're going to be quick, if you see what I mean. Zandvoort, I don't know. Zandvoort's too short a lap and too, that bank corner business. I wish they didn't have that bank corner. I don't know, leading onto the straight. I just don't know why they did that. I suppose it looks spectacular, but it doesn't require, dare I say, it doesn't require a lot of skill. And I don't think it helps in terms of the overtaking possibilities. And anyway, what was wrong with the old Zandvoort is my point. Why did they shorten it like that? I love that old layout. So whenever we have the Dutch Grand Prix now, I always think, I suppose I always felt that about Austria or Spa when we were back to that. No, I never felt that about Spa, to be honest. I did actually see a few long circuit races there, and I'm very glad we have the current Spa. But Austria, I think they could have done a nice upgrade job on the old Austrian Grand Prix circuit. But Zandvoort, I wish they'd kept the basic layout as it was. They could have put a few more chicanes around the back, but the way it was, the corner leading onto the straight was a much better corner, I think. But I love the bits behind the pits. But they made that corner behind the pits, the Hunzerug, the two banked as well, I think, haven't they? It's a bit funny as well. Didn't need to do that because now it's just a bank corner, whereas before it was a lovely corner where you could get the front tucked in and get a bit of a drift going as much as you can in a current Formula One car. So, yeah. What other ones? I like Mexico City. I love that circuit. I love that those long straights, and the fact that it is very, very like the old place, and the stadium thing works quite well. So I'm quite looking forward to Mexico. Brazil too, always look forward to Brazil. That's about it, right? Season ends in Brazil. Oh no, they go to that other place, don't they? Yeah, and yeah, it's all a bit too clinical. That other, the finale is too clinical for me, the finale circuit. Anyway, thank you for that, David B. Sheriff of Zandvoort, yeah, a regular. Hi, Sheriff, how are you? Hi, Peter. Lewis Hamilton, last 5 races. P4, P3, P4, P1, P3, P1. If he carries on like this, yeah, we haven't really celebrated Lewis's win enough at Spa, have we? He did win the Belgian Grand Prix. If he carries on like this and wins more races, Charles will have a serious problem when he arrives with confidence. What do you think? Yeah? I think Charles drove pretty well at Spa. So before we get too carried away by Lewis dominating Charles at Ferrari, let's see how the back end of the year goes for Charles now. Because he definitely went through that bad patch, definitely, no doubt about it. And he just wasn't. He just seemed a bit out of control. And I suppose it was just winning Monaco. If you look at it now, I suppose you got to say, it was the after effect, it was the hangover of winning Monaco, and walking on water sort of thing. And now it's come back in reality that he has to just grind away and be what he was at Spa. And let's see if he can do that from here on in. But it'll be. They're both, neither of them are sort of young, pushy Yuki Tsunodas. They're quite mature, intelligent people. Charles is more emotional, externally anyway, than Lewis. And that's always going to be his bugbear. Lewis, I think, will go there and be super quick and super good because he knows he hasn't got that many more years in Formula One. He's done his Ferrari deal. What a mega thing. He loves the whole thing, the cars, the country, the food, everything about it. And the red overalls. And he's going to just love it. And every time Charles is a bit quicker or has a slightly better race, it's not a big deal because everyone's going to say, well, he's the incumbent driver. Why wouldn't he? And from Lewis's point of view, every time he upstages Charles, it's a great big thing, isn't it? Because we know how good Charles is. So it's just no downside for Lewis. Plus the money in the bank, of course. Shouldn't forget that. So you think, Sheriff of Zandvoort, I think the lineup will be like Lauda, Prost. That's interesting. And you're assuming that Lewis is Lauda, I guess, and Charles is Prost in terms of being around, who had been around longest. And it took Nicky, half a year to work out how to beat Prost, or how to take the race to Prost, French Grand Prix. He sort of drove to the circuit on Saturday morning, I think it was, maybe on Sunday, and just said, right, I've got to work out how to beat this guy. This has been going on long enough. I'm going to win the championship this year. That was the French Grand Prix. And yeah, Lewis is definitely going to be hard to beat at Ferrari. I guess it also kind of depends on whether the car's, I was going to say how good the car is. Let's assume the car's not very good and very knife edgy and difficult to drive. I hope it's not from Lewis's point of view. But if he gets in the car and thinks, wow, this is worse than the Merc, who's actually going to be better then? Because we've seen Charles struggle with the difficult car over the last 4 or 5 races. And Lewis has probably had, 3 years now driving a knife edgy car. He'll probably do a better job in that respect as well. Alessandro Durango. Hi, Peter. Leclerc often rides part throttle through low speed corners. I think it's a driving technique, but someone says it could be very tricky for the V6 hybrid engine management. What's your view? I can't. I think I need to just raise that. Hang on 1 second. I'm going to be very clever here and see if I can raise that up for a 3-line. There you go. How about that? Now I've got to get the. Now I've got to get the thing back, which is not going to be easy. There we go. The chat. I need to see what that means if he's on half throttle from the minute he's going into the corner to the minute he's got his full power and acceleration, or whether we're talking about he's got a little bit more throttle mid-corner than other drivers at that point. I haven't, until I actually see what that means. And how do we know that anyway? Who's got that information? Because that's very precise throttle tracing. And I've had a look at every site out there at the moment that's doing telemetry. None of them are that precise. So, and is that against brake or is that just throttle? And if it's just throttle, it's, that's nothing unusual. I think the two drivers, in my experience at the moment, I would say, who spend the most time on neither throttle nor brake and just let the car settle. Well, three drivers actually are Max, Lewis and Lando. They're doing that beautifully. And George sometimes is pretty good too. But Charles has always been very good on throttle overlap. In other words, not braking with throttle. And so if we're talking about he's just on throttle only and it's slow speed mid-corner, it doesn't seem to be a issue there. Is that bad for the engine? No. I mean there's a lot of stuff that's always, a lot of people always get online and start talking about, oh, the way he drives isn't very good for the engine, this or that. And it used to be the same thing with Senna with the throttle blipping and how good that was for the turbo engine. It's all a load of old nonsense, because if there's any specific thing a driver can do that isn't conducive to getting the best from the engine performance, that will be eliminated from his vocabulary after one test session. He will never do it again. I've never met a racing driver in the world who's said, oh, well, that's the way I want to drive. I don't care if it's bad for the engine. I've never met one, and I don't think any exist, because I don't think any racing drivers are that stupid. So if that wasn't good for the engine, straight away a Ferrari engineer would be saying, that's not so good, Charles. And Charles would be saying, oh, okay, right. So, all these self-appointed experts that get on about that. And it's the same thing with Senna. He wanted to stop that throttle blipping. He knew it wasn't a good thing. He couldn't. It was just a habit that he was in, and it was the way he drove when he was in his zone. And everybody quickly adapted at the time when throttle lag was a big issue with turbos. Everybody very quickly adapted to the way you got around that with the throttle usage. Nigel, for example, very good example. So, yeah, I don't think it's bad for the engine, and I don't think what he does, I've never seen him do anything that remotely looks odd in terms of his throttle use mid-corner. That's all I can say at the moment, Alessandro. But thank you very much, Alessandro, for your question. Back to Sheriff of Zandvoort. Your analysis of the F2 and F3 season with a few rounds to go, and do you plan to have a chat with some of them on this YouTube channel? Thanks for the superb content. The analysis is, very, very interesting, both F3 and F2. Fascinated. I suspect Luke Browning has got the momentum at the moment in Formula 3, but I think Mini is very good as well. I've been watching our friend Max Esterson in the last few races. He seems to qualify really well. He got some points at Spa. It's fun watching him. Yeah, some very good drivers in F3 on the way up. And F2, Isaac Hadjar is just looking fabulous, isn't he? Every time he gets in the car, he looks competitive and quick and surprisingly good. I say surprisingly good because he has this sort of George Russell-like knack of being able to keep the tyres going when most drivers have them go off very quickly. Enzo Fittipaldi's doing well. That's good to see. Yeah, again, I've got a few mates in Formula 2 and hasn't been going very well for them. I'm surprised that Ollie Berman, I think the sort of general assessment of Ollie Berman, the easy one is to say, well, he's got his Formula 1 deal now and he was doing all the Formula 1 stuff and that's obviously affected his driving, but it shouldn't. So that's a bit worrying, and it shouldn't affect his driving and his focus. It shouldn't at all. And for me, with Ollie Berman, it kind of all changed when he stalled in the pits at Imola, when he had the feature race sewn up, and he's never really been on it ever since then. And this is Prema we're talking about, really good team. And I think Kimi's looking pretty good. The great Kimi. I think he is looking pretty good. He's looking like the great Kimi at the moment. There's no reason to think that he isn't going to be really good. So I think he's, there, and Mercedes are probably right to have put so much effort and focus on him. I don't know how lukewarm that is at the moment, but it's going pretty well. As to speaking to these guys, another guy I like watching is Zane Maloney. Hasn't had great results recently, but he looks to be a very, very creative, natural driver, and got a lot of time for him. Having said that, a few of these drivers, in answer to the second part of your question, and you may wonder why I don't do more interviews, and I love chatting to racing people, and the video that I'm going to be putting into this live stream shortly is, I'll explain it in a second, but it is an interview if you like, and it's getting involved with another driver in another discipline. But the problem I have with interviews is that how can I put this without demeaning a lot of my peers? Let's from the other point of view. I think drivers and teams have been subjected to so many poor questions and so much misuse of quotes and information that they now have these immense protective barriers around them to try to minimize anything going wrong. And to me, it all adds up to, I can't be bothered with this. Because if I email now any of the, and I'm not saying it's a slight generalization, but most of the Formula 3 drivers, for sure all the Formula 2 drivers, and all the Formula 1 people, the immediate response I'll get is, oh yeah, can you tell us what you do and what sort of questions you'd like to ask? And the minute that happens, press delete, because for me, I can't even think of what questions to ask a driver. I just want to get to know him. I want to know what he's going to say when we just chat initially and begin the conversation, and then let the conversation run from there. I don't want to start saying, oh, I want to ask him about this race or that race. It's nonsense. It's so childish. It's pathetic. So I just don't even bother with it now. And yeah, occasionally I talk to a lot of them without a microphone and just chatting on the phone or at races, and just chat to them and don't bother doing interviews, because by the time you've got them, by the time they got their Wi-Fi to work and you've sorted out the 3 different times that they've cancelled, and then finally you've got them online, then the questions that you're hamstrung by are so banal that I just can't be bothered with it. And I think that's why a lot of people are turned off by all those interviews, because the drivers just come out with all this tripe that doesn't mean anything. And so I don't bother. That's it. Call me lazy, but that's just the way it is. I like to think I've got a brain and I've got my own eyes, and I love to share my passion for motorsport and for Formula 1 and Formula 3 and Formula 2 and other things that are relative to that. I love to share that, and that's all I can do really. And I know that if I sat down tomorrow with George Russell we were in a minibus going to the long-term car park at Heathrow, not that he ever uses those anymore, and we had a chat, it'd probably be really good, but he wouldn't say any of the things he'd ever say if we were doing an interview. So it's just pointless. And I suppose my problem is that I've known the days when you could do that. I could talk to Mario or Ayrton Senna or Nigel or Carlos Reutemann or Nelson Piquet or Alan Prost or John Watson, or any of these great guys. And I'd say, look, can I talk about this? And we'd have long conversations, and they'd love it. Colin Chapman used to love it. And Ken Tyrrell, because they felt the more I understood about their job, the better job I would do of covering what they do, and that would be to the benefit of all. But that's not the case now. It's all, because all the teams have become mini media hubs, with their own YouTube channels, their own this, their own that, and they think they can control all their own content, and therefore they've got this whole media package that they can sell to their sponsors. They don't actually need people like me coming in and invading their territory and asking annoying questions. Why do they need that? Just the exposure I can give them on my YouTube channel is what it is, but it's probably not as great as they could give themselves on their own YouTube channel. So why do they bother? And so that's my approach. I just don't bother with it. I just do my own thing. And I hope everybody who watches this channel understands that and appreciates that what I'm trying to do is be completely independent of being one of these media hubs. I mean, I'm not even part of a company that controls the output of my YouTube channel in the same way that a lot of other motorsport YouTube channels are these days, not necessarily with teams, but they're owned by bigger companies. They've got employees and this and that. I'm Peter Windsor, and I say what I want to say, and I share what I want to share, and then I go and walk Dexter. What can I say? Who's over there? His ears have just gone up ever since I used the WALK word. No, Dex, a little bit of time. So, yeah, I don't know if that was a rant or not, but whatever it was, it was. Thank you for the question, Sheriff. And Annika Rubin, have you all survived during the summer break? Well, we have, and I'm enjoying it, and it's been an opportunity. This is the segue now to get into what I was talking about of this interview, because I explained this at the start of the video that you're about to watch, or the insert, but I love thinking about the way great racing drivers drive their cars, as I think hopefully most people know, and I love learning from any information I can get about how they do it, how they use the brake pedal, how they use the throttle, how they use the steering. And you can't talk to them about this because they're not really aware of it themselves. It's just like, oh yeah, you turn in a bit later here or a bit earlier there, but that's as specific as they will ever get. So I'm always, in my mind, I'm always looking for ways to understand it and to improve my understanding of what drivers do. And recently, relatively recently, I've rekindled my love for World Championship rallying because I love the WRC Rally 1 cars, particularly 560, 570 horsepower, four-wheel drive, carbon panels, unbelievable rocket ships between the pine trees, over the jumps, on the gravel, on the tarmac. And I think the cars are just so cool. The Toyota Yaris, the Hyundai i20N, the Ford Puma, just wonderful to watch them doing what they're doing, and the noise they make, the sound they make through these forests and these roads and these country things. So I've got really into that because I love the idea of watching them up close, and the onboards are much more revealing in terms of what they can do with the steering and the throttle. And I think a great thing about rallying, unlike other forms of motorsport, is that you can actually sit next to the driver if you're lucky enough, i.e. the co-driver. So, in answer to your question, particularly about the August break, I realized that the Rally of Finland fell neatly in my son's school holidays, the August break, and I had no other commitments. So I took the family up to Finland, and we got there on the Tuesday, and we did the entire Rally of Finland over, from Tuesday through to the following Monday, right through to the ceremonial prize giving. And I managed to get myself alongside Thierry Neuveille in the shakedown stage and do that stage with him. I didn't do anything other than watch and listen, but I didn't actually help in any way. But it was absolutely amazing. It was one of the most incredible things I've done in my life. And it would be completely remiss of me not now to do something that tries to describe for you what I experienced. And bear with me, even if you're not a rallying fan yet. I think you will be as time goes on, because I'm going to be cross-referencing a lot. But what I really loved about this was trying to look at the detail of how Thierry actually drove and what he was doing with his left foot, what he was doing with the throttle, how he used the handbrake for handbrake turns, and where his eyes were and how he was looking at the jumps ahead. And so that's what I did. And I put this video together, and I'd like to thank obviously Hyundai and the World Rally Championship for the video, and the Red Bull Media Hub, who, if you haven't seen them, Red Bull put out some great stuff because they are part owners of the WRC. They're very low profile, very nice how they do it, but phenomenal TV pictures and still images that come out of every rally. And so I put those in as well. So big thanks to Red Bull. So with no more ado, I'm going to ask you now to sit back and relax and enjoy my week in Finland, and I'll see you in a bit. Well, this adventure began back in May when we decided to go to the Rally of Portugal, not far from Spain where we're based. Very simple flight to Porto. Did what I thought was a lap of the old Grand Prix circuit there as well. Very nice to see, down by the ocean. But the main reason for going, of course, was to see the rally cars, the WRC rally cars in action. I hadn't seen them for quite a while. I used to cover rallies for Autocar back in the day. And of course, I'm aware that many Grand Prix drivers over the years have excelled in rallying, from Vic Elford to Jim Clark to Sterling Moss, and more recently, my friend Carlos Reutemann, who finished third in the Rally Côte d'Azur driving for Peugeot in his early retirement years. So I've always had an affinity for rallying. I love rallying. Roger Clark was one of my heroes. Hannu Mikkola, I managed to do a stage with years ago in Wales in the Audi Quattro. And what I love about rallying, what I loved about rallying, and what I still love about it today, is the opportunity to see these guys at work. And that's something that doesn't happen very often in motorsport. The opportunities for sitting next to a driver and actually seeing what he's doing in the car he's competing with are virtually nil in any other form of motorsport. But in rallying, you can do it. And the WRC, as it is today, has really captured my imagination, because the cars are just rocket ships. 570 horsepower, four-wheel drive, hybrid, unbelievably quick, very light, carbon panels, of course. And what I love about these cars is that they are very, very unexpected. A Formula 1 car looks quick, a Formula 2 car looks quick, a Formula 3 car looks quick. They look as if they're designed to do what they do. When you look at a WRC 1 rally car, you see a Toyota Yaris, or you see a Hyundai i20N, or you see, if it's or you see a Puma, Ford Puma. But you have absolutely no idea how quick they are to drive until you kind of stand there, I guess 10 meters away, when they're doing 123 miles an hour through the forest with trees both sides. And then you start to realize how quick these things are. And then you appreciate how good these drivers are behind the wheel. And I use that plural term because they're all very, very good. I mean, Oliver Solberg, who's dominating WRC 2 at the moment, is just phenomenal. His talent is right up there with anybody's in the world. I defy any driver from any discipline to be confident of beating Oliver Solberg in anything. And that's WRC 2, which is the category below 1, obviously. And all the guys in 1 are just phenomenal. And so the question arises, what is their skill level compared with a Max Verstappen or a Lewis Hamilton or a Charles Leclerc? Well, of course, it's very, very difficult to make comparisons across different forms of motorsport. What I would say is that Max Verstappen is a massive rally fan, as is Lando Norris, interestingly, as is Carlos Sainz, for very, very obvious reasons. And I think what they love about it, which is what I love about it most of all, getting round to the point, is that it's one of the few forms of motorsport, maybe the only form of motorsport left, where going sideways is quick. And that's a very simple thing to say. But it was Gilles Villeneuve who said that to Nigel Roebuck years ago. I think it was about 1981, when they're having to be really careful with the turbo power and so forth. And he was saying, and every time they were out of line, they were just destroying the tyres. And he said to Nigel once, he said, it's a shame, isn't it? Because going sideways isn't quick anymore in Formula 1. And that's the case. That is the case. Yeah, and I've loved, and I still love, analysing the driving of the Grand Prix drivers, the F2 drivers, the F3 drivers, looking at the drivers on the way up. That is what I do. That is what I love about motorsport, is the way these guys do it and how they do it differently from one another, and trying to look at what they do differently from one another. And I have no doubt at all that any of the top 5 rally drivers in the world today, had they taken a different path, have certainly the skill sets to have become incredibly successful in Formula 1 if they've been with the right team. Equally, I have no doubt at all that if Max and Lewis and Charles, for whatever reason, have been diverted into rallying at an early stage, would have been outstanding rally drivers. There's a lot of similarities. Balance, obviously this thing we talk about with car control. What is car control? It's the ability to hold a slide, front or rear, but it's also a precision thing. It's a judgment thing. It's an organizational thing. And it's understanding what the car is about to do next. It's a feel for what the car's about to do next. They talk a lot about feel in rallying. Did I have the feeling today? And that's a good term in many ways, because it sums up, I just didn't have quite the rhythm I needed to have through the forest or through the S's or whatever it is. But it doesn't really define what they do so well. And I've made a point, as a lot of people know, I think, hopefully by now, on this channel, to talk about the differences in the driving. And when I talk about short corners, I talk about something that Max does, that Lewis does, that Charles does. Oscar Piastri is starting to do it very well too. And that is basically extending the straights into and out of the corners, particular type of corner. Preferably a sort of medium speed 90-degree right or left be the perfect examples. But long, fast corners, a bit like Spa, less easy to do, and in fact less necessary to do. But the point about short corners is not the short corner per se. It's the ability to do what they have to do to the car in order to extend the straights into and out of the corners. That's the difficult thing. And to do that, they have to have incredible touch and feel with the throttle, the brakes, and the steering, and balance. And I talk a lot about how at that stage, it's very like a billiard table with all the balls in the middle and having to move the table on all four corners to avoid any of the balls hitting the edge of the table. That is what it's like at that moment when they're going from dead straight flat out into what they're going to do next, into the corner, and looking for the appropriate moment at the least possible downside to rotate the car. And it struck me as I went to Portugal that a way of getting closer to that and feeling that would be to watch rally drivers up close and personal. And so incredibly fortunately, through very good friends of mine, I managed to land myself a drive with Thierry Neuveille in the shakedown stage of the Rally of Finland, which recently finished. He finished second in the rally. And of course, I had some trepidation about it, because you see these pictures of in Finland, particularly, it's very, very fast. I think it's the fastest rally on the championship calendar. There are 4 or 5 jumps on the stage I was going to do. On some of the longer stages there are probably 10 jumps, I would imagine, and they're flat out. Well, they're almost flat out, but you approach them at top speed anyway. There was that, and what sort of impact that would have for somebody like me when you land on back injury and things like that. And also, obviously, just getting into a car with somebody that good, would I be able to adjust to what was going on? It would be so quick. And the pine trees and the proximity of the people and the marshals and the speed we'd be going, obviously through slow corners, you're doing 50, 60 kilometers an hour sometimes. But when the car's going, and they're unbelievably quick on acceleration, you're looking at anything around 100 miles an hour, just above 100 miles an hour. And it's really quick. I was talking to Max about this in the Spanish Grand Prix. I mentioned I was going to be doing this with Terry, and he said, "Oh, wow, fantastic." And I said, "Well, come on, you should have a go, Max." He said, "Yeah, I'd love to, but the trees," and that's, of course, is what everybody thinks. I try not to think about the trees. This may sound very pretentious, but in accepting or agreeing to do this, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to sit next to Thierry Neuveille. But I got to say, there's only about 2 or 3 rally drivers that I saw in Portugal that I would actually want to sit next to and have the confidence in knowing that they absolutely know what they're doing, and I would just trust my life to them. There are lots of guys as quick as Terry, maybe even quicker, that I'm not going to mention names, but I wouldn't want to sit next to them, because they struck me as being, just from what you could see in terms of change of direction and the way they're driving the cars, they struck me as sort of Yuki Tsunoda-ish, of being absolutely on the edge, and the reason they're quick is that they're able to sit on that edge pretty comprehensively. But the minute something goes wrong, they either come back from the edge or they go over the edge. Whereas Terry looked to me to be a driver a bit in the mold of Max or Lewis, who can manipulate the car basically to do what he wants it to do within reason. Obviously, if he's got mega understeer, he's got to drive around the understeer and get the best from the car, or flick oversteer, whatever it is. But what I'm talking about is that ability to have that sort of slightly flat feeling of the car before he's going to do something, ask it to do something dramatic. And he has that touch. It looked like that to me in the way he was doing his progressions, his transitions from straights to starting to throw the car either way to get it slowed for a left or right hander. Not slowed, but set up for a left or right hander. Everything looked to have that lovely soft edge. Sébastien Ogier too, absolutely superb in that area. I would say there's very little difference between those two, actually. Kalle Rovanperä, I would put him in the Ronnie Peterson, Gilles Villeneuve, absolutely on the edge, incredibly quick. Ayrton Senna, you could probably bracket him with, I would imagine, in terms of racing drivers. Unbelievably quick, but so near that edge that I, as a human being who values my life, I wouldn't have felt quite as comfortable. Same with Ott Tanak. I think he's a similar sort of driver. Unbelievably quick, incredible car control, but a lot of it is reflexes and just reacting to what he's doing. Whereas, as I say, Thierry Neuveille struck me as a driver that is just a little bit ahead of what's going to happen next. And that's what I thought. That's what I love about Grand Prix drivers. That's what I love about drivers like Lewis or Max, that they are slightly ahead of what the car is going to do all the time. If Ott Tanak is George Russell, then Thierry Neuveille is Lewis Hamilton. I think that's the good comparison, I think. And so it went on, and we got down to the detail of when I was going to do it. And the last email, well, an email I got from Hyundai, he drives for Hyundai, was, you're going to be a busy guy on Thursday, so get ready. And so I was kind of ready, I think, hopefully. So this is the story of what I did there in Finland. And I'm not doing it from the point of view of, wow, it was incredible, I was so scared, or this or that. I'm going to try to analyze everything that happened in a way that I think will be useful and helpful, if that is not sounding too pretentious again, to what we understand about the great drivers, whether they're Grand Prix drivers or rally drivers. And that's the purpose for doing this. And I'm going to keep looking at rallying from here on in, because I think it is the most incredible sport. Photographically, it is unbelievable, the television shots they can get now from the helicopter or whatever it is, drones they're using, and also photographic, still photography as well. And beyond that, A, the ability to sit next to a driver, B, to see them at work so graphically on the onboards anyway, and C, footwell stuff. I said to Hyundai, is it possible to get a camera in the footwell of the car? And they said, oh, it might be, I'm not sure, it might be potluck. No. Anyway, email comes back, yeah, we got the football camera organised. I couldn't believe it. And I understand why in Formula One things are so difficult, but that's why when it's the August break and I got a week off, I go to Finland for the Thousand Lakes Rally, because, to give it its correct title, because it is an opportunity to see footwork and to see handwork and to see the eyes and where they're looking and how they balance the car and the arm movements and all these things that it's quite difficult to see it in Formula One. You can see it from the outside, which is how I certainly make most of my decisions about what's going on and who's doing what, but it's very rare to be able to get so close to somebody as good as Thierry Neuveille. I mean, this guy, the quality of his driving. I was struck at the end of the stage, and we're going to get on in a minute to how it all happened chronologically. But when I got to the end of the stage, the only thought that came through my mind was, I don't think there's anybody on the planet Earth right now who could have been quicker on that stage than Thierry Neuveille. He was absolutely superb in his judgment. Even when the car didn't do exactly what he wanted it to do, he would be patient, and everything he did was just pin sharp. Unbelievable pleasure to see that. And I wasn't in any way frightened. My pulse rate, I don't think, went over 100 at any stage. I just totally committed in my trust to him and his ability to do the job and how professional he was. And so it worked out incredibly well. So I think we've got some great video here. And I don't want to put it under the heading of, it's rallying compared with Formula One. This is a way of looking at Formula One through a much bigger eyeball, which is the eyeball of rallying that it provides us. The quality of the driving is very, very similar. They're doing different things, of course, and their commitment to their sport are totally different things. But what they're actually doing physically, there's a lot of similarity. And that's what I hope to be able to show with these upcoming videos. It was incredibly well done. Alpine Stars kit, overalls, underwear, shoes, Stand 21 hands collar, Stilo helmet, open helmet with the radio mic built in, and yeah, good to go. So we drove over to the stage. It was about 25 minutes drive over to the stage. When I got there, it was a sort of little mini industrial area in which we drove in, and all the cars were there, the teams were there, and I was sort of walking up and down and looking at Taku Katsuta, Toyota, and Elvin Evans, fabulous driver as well, and Toyota, and watching all these guys, and they're just chatting away, and some of them are doing, working on the cars, because it's strict rules in rallying that if something goes wrong on the stage, only the two drivers, the co-driver and the driver, can make adjustments or changes or work on the car. So they're constantly doing that, and constantly the two drivers, the driver and the co-driver, do practices of how to changing a wheel as quickly as possible, doing this, doing that. Lots of limitations on the type of jack you can use, everything else. So brilliant to see the drivers all getting their hands dirty, as I said in one of the tweets I put out. Very unusual to see that. None of this sort of arriving with a briefcase and a backpack. It's all, get the hands dirty. The overalls look a little bit dirtier than they do in Formula One. But I sort of wandered around looking, thinking, there's a lot of people out there watching this. I'm going to be in that car with Thierry Neuveille. I couldn't believe it, that it was going to happen. And so I was in my kit, obviously, waiting for the moment. And the car came back from Thierry's second run. And Martin Weidegger, his co-driver, really cool guy, lovely guy, very, very switched on, totally in sync with the way Thierry thinks and drives. Got out of the car and we had a bit of a chat. And that was my seat then. And I had about 20 minutes to get ready and get in whilst they changed the springs, because it was a bit soft, and I could hear Thierry in the background talking to the engineers about how the car was a bit floppy and moving around too much. They went stiffer. I thought, that's a good thing. Yeah, fine. I wonder what effect that's going to have on my back. Anyway, I had to climb in with the car up on the jack still, which was quite difficult actually, because I had a kidney brace on as well, sort of Sterling Moss spec, 1958 fan wall spec. Just thinking, it won't hurt to have that to protect the old kidneys and the backbone if it's quite a big thud when we hit the ground on the jumps. And climbed in, and everything's very, very compact. And I was immediately struck by how close the two drivers are sitting to one another, and obviously you're wedged into this seat, and just getting that right took a little bit. But it struck me that it was very like the pictures and what I always imagined it would have been like to have been in the Gemini, the two-man Gemini NASA space program craft, when there were just two of them together in those cones, and that's what I guess it was about, the same sort of proportion, same sort of size. And seatbelt on, hands collar on. I had quite a lot of movement fore and aft, which you're supposed to have. That's fine. There was the headrest thing was lateral, so that was okay. And in the footwell area, there's a sort of carbon plate with 3 sensors at the top. But keep your feet off the sensors was the instruction from all the mechanics. If I'd done that, it would have been a drama. I don't know what would have happened. But yeah, you said brace your feet there, and keep your hands tucked in either side of you into the side of the seat. I was thinking, wow, what is going to happen here? No mobile phone, couldn't have anything hard or anything that might come out and fly around. So the more they talk about all that, the more you think, what is this going to be like? Anyway, Thierry was talking a lot to the engineers, and he puts on his helmet and climbs in as well. And I chatted to him. I got to know him a little bit the day before, and we chatted. We chatted then, about. He went to the Belgian Grand Prix actually, and because he's obviously Belgian, he has Red Bull in common with quite a lot of Formula One people, and he said that he was there and he was hanging out with Max a bit at Spa. But interestingly, I said, what do you think of Max's qualifying lap then? Wow, amazing, wasn't it? And he said, I saw that quickly and then I had to leave. And I thought, that's a bit of a shame. So I'm not saying there was any disinterest there. He's got massive respect for Max, and I think he loves Formula One, but there's totally different worlds. I mean, he had other things going on. Max's life is here. Thierry Neuville's is there. Bang, they're on opposite sides of the globe almost. So it was that, he is what he is, just total pro for the sport that he's in. So he got in gloves, and he's doing quite a lot of this, rubbing this and, getting fired up. And I'm thinking, okay, Thierry, you don't have to get that fired up, mate. And so the engine's now running, the car's on the ground, obviously. And these things, I've talked about them being rocket ships. The other thing is I haven't mentioned is the noise they make. I just love the sound of a WRC1 rally car, especially when it's in the forest and it's just echoing through the forest. There is no better engine note than that. It's absolutely perfect for what these cars are, these rocket ships. And so this thing's on idle, and it's got a sequential shifter up here, and next to that with the red handle he's got his handbrake, so obviously you don't touch the handbrake. Sequential shifter, and a clunk into reverse, and then he sort of chugged forward, and I thought, oh, this is all right, it's a bit like being in a normal road car through the sort of park area. And then he said, oh, we have we need to charge the engine because there's not enough charge. It's a hybrid engine, of course. So I said, oh, okay, cool. And he said, we heat the brakes and we go. And so he instead of turning right, which is where you'd normally go for the start of the stage, he turned left onto the sort of, it was actually it was just a 2-lane road. And we go down this 2-lane road and he's going, wah, 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 just throttle and braking unbelievably hard, and about 8 times. And he said, oh yeah, it's good now, it's good now. And then we had to turn back, and there's the public road, you know, I shouldn't be saying this, I know, there's cars coming towards us, and there's like a gap, and it's obviously what he did, he just looked at the back of this oncoming car, the right rear corner, right hand side of the road, of course, and he just goes, handbrake on, straight back. Unbelievable handbrake turn. I thought, wow, this is going to be fun. So we drive into the beginning of the stage. He does a few more of these. I said, what horsepower have we got now, Terry? He said, oh, he's about 560 now. He's okay, it's good. Okay, good, thank you. I'm smarting here just thinking about it now, if I think about it. And so we go to the stage, and there's all these other cars, C2, C3 cars, all lined up on the left. I don't know what was that. Well, I think they'd all finished, and they're waiting to do their third run or something. But they knew that Terry and the sort of top WRC runners were going to go through before them. So they're all there, they're all watching, and we drive up, and he does about 4 more of these. And you know, there's people like that. It's just typical racing driver, you know, there's people 2 inches away, no problem at all. Ott Tanak's in front of us, his Hyundai co-driver, teammate. And I mean, boy, it's Ott Tanak there. And he had a guy with him as well, really nice guy, ex-rally driver, Belgian guy, who drives one of those amazing Ioniq 5 electric Hyundai things, which are, I don't know, what are they, 700 horsepower or something ridiculous? Anyway, we're going up to the stage now, and I have to open the thing and give the paper to the guy, which I do. And then I look up, and we're about, I don't know, 2 cars lengths away from Tanak, who's now about to start. Like you can see the counter. And then so Tanak lets out the clutch and just stones and gravel and stuff, straw, just everywhere. And Tanak goes, like that, disappears into this cloud of dust. And oh, now it's us. So then Terry just sort of up there. And I guess there's a couple of minutes before they send him off. And he's just sitting there. And he goes like that, and bang, like that. And this is what it was like. And I'm going to now talk you through the video in real time as it was for that stage. And I won't do a very good job, because even now it's unbelievably quick for me to look at it and to say exactly what was going on. But I'll make a couple of comments as we're talking about it. And then we'll come back and look at some more details. So as I say, there we are, we're going. And already he's just on full opposite lock because he's going around that right-hander. And I think, yeah, that's good, beautiful slide, beautiful slide. And he doesn't brake, I don't think, into that left-hander through there. Back end's still there. Now, all of a sudden, I didn't know this, but we're already approaching some serious jumps. And he's already just twirling the wheel. Unbelievable ability and speed with which he's hitting the handbrake as well. Now we're going on a fast section now. You can see he's in 4th gear, and I'm already, we're there. You see, this is another jump. Whoa! And it's just like the car floats in the air and then just lands, and it's not actually that big a thud. This is the big jump. Oh! And you can see it's a bit nose up. That was a really big one. There is this fast left-hander. He uses the handbrake a little bit, gets the thing sideways. Got quite a lot of understeer there, and that's what I'm talking about. And he's kind of puts a thumbs up there to say, are you okay? So we'll have a little bit more of that stage, but I just want to now go back to that jump in slow motion, because we got the footwell as I mentioned earlier, and to see that in slow motion, I think you start to get a feel for what I talk about with use of the brake pedal. There's one way to use a brake pedal, which is bang, on and off, and then, or as long as you want to stay on it. There's another way, which is to have feel for the brake pedal and massage it slightly before you get the car stopped, and you find exactly the right moment to give it full braking. And what Thierry does, and we'll see it in some other videos coming up, you can see that's obviously his braking foot. The clutch is on the left there. Use the cursor here. The clutch that's the foot clutch, which he only uses at the start. Then his foot is poised above a very large brake pedal, and then obviously the right foot's on the throttle. And what he does, and we'll see this as the videos go on, when he doesn't need, when he's about to brake with a little bit of graduation, he angles the foot slightly so the entire sole is not on the brakes, just part of the foot is on the brakes, and then he goes full on the brakes. And that you can't see that in real time. That's why I've done this in slow-mo. This is just the jump. And I think by this stage he'd realized that, and this is chatting to him later, he'd realized that there was something a little bit wrong with the front of the car, because the car shouldn't take off. It shouldn't do that too much. It should be about like that and just land like that. But this one was going up. And that's because it turns out they damaged the splitter on the previous run. And he had assumed, I think, that had been changed, and it hadn't been for whatever reason. Probably didn't have a spare, I imagine, out there for the shakedown. So the car's quite high. And I think on this one, you see he's just starting to brake a little bit to try to get the front down as he goes over the jump. That's what we're going to see here now. So this is in slow motion, going towards that jump. You can see he's just braked slightly there, going before. Now you can see him angling the brakes. And then you see his legs just jumping on the footwell area. I'm only looking at the footwell area at the moment as the car hits the ground. I'm on the right there with my hands tucked in beside the seats, as you can imagine. Now he's going into, there's a quick left-hander at the end of this straight, and you can see again he's braking there with a slight angle on the foot. It's not absolutely 100% hard braking, it's just grazing the brakes, and he's playing with throttle as well, changing down, going into the corner. And you can see with the steering, let's go back and see what he's doing with the steering when he's in mid-air. See how straight he actually keeps that steering. It's interesting to look at that. So he's got quite a lot of angle on it there. It's interesting, isn't it? He's got quite a lot of angle in mid-air. And it's a weird feeling when you're in mid-air. It's just like everything goes slightly quiet and you're floating. And it's a lovely feeling, actually. And then when you land, it is a little bit like being in an aircraft when you're landing. A pretty good landing, gotta say. Everything is very delicate, even though it's a brutal, fast rally car. It's a big, bad WRC1 rally car, as Martin Sess described it when he first drove a hybrid car recently in the Latvia rally, when he was incredibly good. I mean, he's another guy with a massive amount of talent. Let's just continue that where we are on that left-hander after that jump with the slow-mo again, just to see a little bit more of the footwork in conjunction with his handwork as well. So third gear, fourth on accelerator. He's got quite a lot of understeer there. Let's just stop it there. Look at the understeer he's got. This is what he was, I think, what he was complaining about throughout most of the rally over the next 3 days, was that there was just too much understeering thing to get it to work like that. So fourth gear. He put a thumbs up. Are you okay? And I said, yeah, sure. Faster, please. Yeah, right. Fourth gear. Was he going for fifth now? No, changing down to third. Okay, so what's coming out? So he's just... There you can see is a very good example. Look at that left foot as he goes into that. He's coming up to that left-hander there. He's in fourth. And watch what he does. Look how he's massaging the brakes there. There's no overlap at all. He sometimes deliberately left foot brakes. But in terms of throttle and brake, it's absolutely clinical. And I imagine that's how Max Verstappen and Lewis are. Just perfect with no overlap at all.
I mean, when we are overlapping, it's basically to get a first impression of the grip, and then as soon as we are sure about the grip, then it's just like basically come off throttle, go on the brakes.
You don't like to overlap unless you have to.
No. I mean, it heats the brakes. There's no sense other than for very fast travel rallies and very fast corners, even on tarmac. When the car is on a softer setup, we use it sometimes to just get a bit of brake to settle the car down, to set it into the springs, into the damper, and then keep the car a bit more stable in the very fast corners, because obviously in rallying we are driving quite soft and there is a bit of movement, so sometimes in the very fast corner combinations you just want to use that to put the car a bit lower to make it a bit more stable and keep more speed through the corner. But other than that, it's just simple.
Now let's have a look at this, because this is an example of getting oversteer without touching the handbrake, and that is an example of just using the brakes to get the back end to work. And look how delicate that is. He's using the throttle, a little bit of brake, provoking it, got a bit of understeer on exit, which obviously I guess he wouldn't have liked. But don't forget, these are four-wheel drive cars, so the understeer is not on exit isn't exactly a terrible thing. It's more or less allowing you to get the car pretty straight. Anyway, this is the entire stage now in real time, so we're going to do that again now. So there he goes. Wah! Back end comes out, nice opposite lock slide. Two of them actually. Short straight, then we go to a left-hander. Still flat on the throttle, as you can see. Now a bit of braking through this left-hander, grabs the lower gear. A bit of handbrake there by the look of it. Yeah, got the back end round beautifully. Then we're coming up to this fast section where we've got two jumps. We get a little bit airborne here. Whoa! It's on a slight curve, and now a big one here. Look at that. That's when he's feeling how high the nose is going. Then you hear this is when he starts to brake as we're taking off because it's so high. You just saw the tops of the trees there through this left-hander where he has understeer and oversteer. Look at the handwork there. Look at that. This is Fernando Alonso mid-corner. It's seen at Ricciardo probably. And then we come up relatively soon to quite a tight left-hander where he really has to throw it sideways. There you go. Look at that. Just fabulous. Look at that car control. Look at that. And then you get total... 45 degrees to the apex with full power. Just fantastic feeling. That is what rallying gives you, and that's why I say it's one of the few forms of motorsport where it's still quick to be sideways, and this is what rallying is all about. Look how quickly we're going there. I've no idea what the speed is. Martin told me later that we were doing about 175 kilometers at the quickest point, but I reckon we're in the 80 to 90 mile an hour mark just there as we're sliding through all these trees everywhere. As I say, I had total confidence in him. He knew, yeah, there's some more stones on the left there, but he's riding those beautifully. Right-hander here, yeah, slows. That's that corner we saw before. Now we come up to the virtual chicane. You'll see, yeah, he's talking about it now. Fifth gear, fourth, third, and then accelerate, blast through. So you do it at the last possible moment in the chicane, I guess. Now there's this couple of corner. Look at that. Look how sideways he is there with no handbrake. Amazing. And then, yeah, left, right, coming up. More stones there. A lot of stones there. Look at that. Lovely feeling. It's an amazing feeling when you have that angle and all that power. Now we're coming up to the final jump. And I'm thinking, go on, are you going to brake here, Terry, or not? Yeah, he just brakes to get the nose down. Boom, like that. And then we stop. And he brakes hard down to the thing at the end of the stage. At this point I'm saying you should be in Formula 1, Terry, and I think he was a bit insulted by that. It's not what he wanted to hear. There's Tanak in front of us. I love those clunks. I mean, this is just such a great car. I love that car. There's one more thing I just want to show, and the handbrake is so quick that I think the best way to look at it is in slow motion to see how he uses the handbrake on corners. So let's have a look on this video now, and you can see what we're doing. See the effect it has. Just locks the rear wheels, basically. I mean, why did all road cars have that? What a mega thing. Wouldn't do much for the tyres, of course. Pirelli Scorpions, great tyres. Gotta have those. Next year, sadly, Pirelli are pulling out of rallying, and it's going to be Hankook doing the tyres. But at the moment, you see me there. I'm sitting fairly rigidly. I'm not frightened, I gotta say. Just loving every minute of it. So yeah, you can see that. Let's just see again his handbrake movement. Just see, he puts a hand on the handbrake and see what it does to the attitude of the car. Look at that. Wow, fabulous. And then he's just on the power. Heikki Kovalainen, who obviously won the Hungarian Grand Prix and who is a great guy, and we wish him congratulations. He's just come through a big op. He's doing really well. And he's been doing some national rallies in Finland, and I think he's going to do more, maybe some European Rally Championships. And I was asking him about the getting used to using the handbrake and the foot brake, and of course it's not an issue because you foot brake as you normally would with your left foot as you want to do it, with overlap or no overlap, and the handbrake you don't really think of as a brake, you just think of as a sort of mega thing which just gets the back end out. A little bit like, well, it is actually the fiddle brake thing that McLaren had with Mika Hakkinen and David Coulthard. It's exactly what they had. And that's why Mika loved it, because he just get the car like that, kill the understeer on the McLaren. And so that was it. You know, it's difficult in many ways to really describe what it was like being alongside Thierry Neuveille. All I can say is that I felt as if I was beginning to touch and look at the things that a lot of the great drivers have been doing for scores of years, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, going back to the 1900s. They all have, the great ones, all have the ability that Thierry Neuveille has, which is that feel for how to use the brakes, how to use the throttle, the very precise moment to exercise that power and to balance the car in a way that is perfect for what you need for that corner, for that car in that situation. In Max's case, in most corners, it's for shortening the corner, it's for finding the moment of least possible downside for the rotation and to make sure he's got a nice long approach straight so he can really carry speed into the corner and obviously extend the straight on exit. For Thierry Neuveille, it's sometimes that, very rarely, probably that on tarmac rallies, but on gravel, it's more having the car in a position where he can just get the power on in a linear way as soon as possible. But that requires a lot of throwing the car sideways either way and then getting a balance as he's on the rotation point, the apex, if you like, that gives him that lovely exit. And it's just a joy and a pleasure to feel that, to feel yourself at 45 degrees to the apex with power on and knowing that's quick is, well, I think for all people that love motorsport, it's absolute nirvana, and it was for me. Bring it on. I want to do more. I'm going to watch more rallies, and I'm going to keep much more in touch with the world of rallying because I have so much respect for these guys, for all the teams, for all the drivers, particularly for Thierry, because obviously I've got a little bit of a relationship with him now and kind of a little bit understand where he's coming from and leading the championship. He's leading the world championship at the moment by 27 points.
We were asked to keep it safe, but on the other hand, we knew the importance of taking points in the power stage.
Sure.
Can make a big difference in the overall result. And try to be efficient. When there are ruts, we are quite fast. When there are no ruts, we were really slow this weekend. So we need to find out why.
Almost certainly, I suspect Sébastien Ogier, who's now second, will now decide to do every round of the championship. He'd announced at the start of the year he was only going to do selected rallies, which you're allowed to do in rallying. Kind of a laid-back thing, I guess. And now I suspect he's got half a chance of winning the championship, equaling the record of Sébastien Loeb. And I suspect he'll now do all the rallies. It's kind of strange that you can change your mind once you've committed to one thing, I guess, because the other teams could argue, well, you know, we based our season on him only doing the selected rounds and now it's all changed. But anyway, he is allowed to do that by the regs, and so that's probably what will happen. So it's going to be pretty tight, pretty close. Next rally, of course, is going to be Greece, a rally of Acropolis, and that's going to be hot and dusty and fast and difficult and all those things. So a big thanks to Thierry, big thanks to Hyundai for organising all that. Just wonderful. And, you know, for a guy like me to be able to sit next to a driver like Thierry Neuveille is something I'll treasure all my life, because how often do you get to touch those things, feel those things that we talk about so often on vids? And I'm going to keep cross-referencing to it because I think it's very, very relevant. So yeah, that's what I did over the August break in answer to your question, Annika. What a week that was. And as I say, you could never do that. As much as I love watching everything you can do in Formula One, you could never actually get inside the cockpit and see what they're actually doing. That's what I love about rallying, because you can do that. Yes, there are other, touring car racing, all those other things, and off-road. But rallying has this added element of the unknown, having to be able to react to what's happening next. And also this whole thing about going sideways is quick. And you can't say that about much of the touring car racing these days, a lot of which is on rails, even though it's very spectacular and close. But that's what I love about rallying. Anyway, and I hope you enjoyed that, because for me, it's kind of a bridge between what we see from the outside and what Formula One obviously is in terms of its results, but it's kind of a bridge which explains a lot of what's going on. And guys like And Terry's not only obviously a driver of immense talent out there. There are lots of them, and I didn't do them justice, didn't do his opposition justice. But Terry was the guy I was with, and I can tell you now, I have absolutely no doubt, his standard of feel and touch is absolutely world class motorsport standard, not just in terms of rallying. Absolutely superb. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. That's my August break. Got a few other things coming out. Going to the UK fairly soon for the opening of the London exhibit of the Formula One exhibition, which should be good. Going very well. Pre-show ticket sales are fabulous, and so we're looking forward to that very much. So moving on now, back to where we were. Roderick Bodevins. Oh, the humanity! What a season. Few seats left. I say all that to say this. Who would you like to see in the second Alpine? And I might digress. Hope Andretti might buy Alpine in time. Well, we should mention, of course, there that they've now got Ollie Oakes running Alpine, which is a very good thing for Alpine. I imagine Ollie is doing what basically the model of Christian Horner, who had his own Formula GP2 team and GP3 teams at the time he got the Red Bull offer, and he managed to keep the GP3 and GP2 operations going while he then went on to be team principal of Red Bull. I imagine that's what Ollie's doing, and why not? He's not that far away from them, is he? He's just down the road in Swindon, not that far, Oxfordshire, and he'll do a good job. He's got a very good racing brain. I've done quite a few interviews with Ollie already on this channel, so you can look at those and see the way he thinks and talks. He's got a good feel for racing, good feel for drivers, and that's a big thing for Alpine. So I would like to see Jack Doohan in the other car next year. I love to see the next generation coming along, and I think he's been there for a while now on the edge, and he's a racer. He's a bit like Liam Lawson. He's a racer. He's fairly spiky, but he's a little bit less spiky, I think, than Liam. But he's very good, and he's a racer. And I think the Formula One could really benefit from having Jack there, and obviously he's Mick's a top man as well. So that's what I hope will happen there. And of course, I think it's a big decision for them to take Ollie Oakes to go sort of away from the whole French management style, and probably Flabs had something to do with that as well. I would think he would probably be getting very good references on Ollie from Bruno Michel, his mate, running F2 and F3. Trail Break 3, yeah, good name. Formula One's become like a drama-filled soap opera. Thanks, Liberty. I assume you're being serious there, or are you being sarcastic? It's a bit difficult to tell. Depends whether you like drama-filled soap operas, isn't it, really? Me, I like watching classic movies. As soon as they got to colour, they kind of lost the plot. I think, no, I'm only joking. All right, I know. Apopava Papava. Hello, Peter. Everyone's talking about Newey and how good he is and all, but people forget that he designed the undrivable Williams car that cost the life of the greatest driver of all, Senna. Well, I think that's a bit unfair. He certainly was chief designer, but he wasn't the only engineer involved in that car for a start. And a lot of what you saw with that car was due to the absurd regulation changes they made as a result of the Hockenheim Agreement, signed in August 1993, which basically banned everything electronic on the car and made them run super stiff and with just a plank under the car, and run as low as you could to get as much downforce. And it wasn't Adrian's fault that car was an undrivable car, because virtually all of them were. And it wasn't the only car that had a shunt. I mean, look at Rubens Barrichello the day before, and obviously, poor Roland Ratzenberger as well. So I think that's an unfair comment. But Ayrton knew what he was doing. He knew that if he went over those bumps flat with the tyre pressures and tyre temperatures low, there was a very good chance the front was going to lift. He for sure knew that, but he knew it was a risk worth taking because he was Ayrton Senna. He'd taken risks like that before, like trying to take the jump at Cadwell Park flat in Formula 3 and hitting the marshal's post. And he also believed that the Benetton was illegal at the time, and Michael was in his mirror, so there's no way he was not going to try and lead through Tamburello and keep the lead going down into Tosa at the restart. That's what it was all about. And the ridiculous thing, the reality is what actually was the biggest factor in Ayrton's accident was the deployment of that absurd so-called safety car, which was undrivable after one lap, 0 brakes and tyres, very, very slow. There was an opportunity to upgrade it to a Porsche supercar, which was rejected. And they did 4 or 5 laps behind that car at Imola. Tyre temperatures dropped. And it was all because Bernie was absolutely adamant that Formula One had to have a pace car to match the pace car that was suddenly bringing the audience alight in IndyCar. But it wasn't the pace car, it was the fact that Nigel Mansell was over there doing amazing things, and the audience in Europe, particularly the UK TV audience, was just massive the minute Nigel went over there as the reigning world champion, for obvious reasons. But Bernie's way of fighting that was to get this safety car out in Formula One, and it was just a ridiculous Opel road car. Anyway, so there you go. Lucas, hi Peter, how impressive have you been with Lewis's performances and his resurgence, getting 2 wins? Well, yeah, massively impressive. I don't know how many other people have been saying it, but I've been saying since the beginning of 2022 how impressed I've always been at Lewis's ability still to be motivated, even though he lost the 21 championship the way he did. And even though this Mercedes was a dog of a car to drive, even though he was now it was elbows out alongside, Yuki Tsunoda and Kevin Magnussen instead of at the front of the race with Max, he kept his motivation and he kept his ability intact, and he still survived it. He didn't have too many offs. He drove like a true pro. What can I say? And the minute that car was going to be half reasonable, and I use the word half here in italics because I still think the other half has got to be found, Lewis was always going to be there. And there were moments when everybody was saying, oh, isn't George great? And Lewis ought to retire and all the rest of it. But I was never going down that path because he's such a natural talent and he's so good at isolating the rest of his life from his racing life and remaining motivated. I mean, 7 times world champion with all that road dust, and he's still as hungry as you could possibly be, as hungry as a 17-year-old Formula 3 driver. And that's what's so great about Lewis Hamilton. So Paul Muscat is saying in 3 words, 3 questions, Adrian Newey, Aston Martin. Yeah, well, let's not think about that. It's a bit annoying, isn't it? Jack, good name of my son. Hi Peter, thoughts on Snetterton, and do you have any tips on fixing a strong grip? Thoughts on Snetterton? Well, I've always had a soft spot for Snetterton for how many reasons can I come up with? Yeah, 3 probably. I mean, it was a great circuit before it was changed back in the 60s. It was a Formula 1 circuit. They had Grand Prix there, and not Grand Prix, but Formula 1 races. And Jimmy always drove well at Snetterton, had some of his best races at Snetterton. And he also had a massive lose in the 63 Indy Lotus 29, testing it under the bridge near the back, and managed not to hit anything. Went between 2 parked cars from memory. This is in testing, obviously. But yeah, great circuit. I love it also because it's near the Lotus factory, so that whole part of the world speaks of motorsport to me, and I always get a sort of, bit of an adrenaline rush when I get onto the A11 and head out that part out there. And also, it's where Carlos first drove the Lotus 49 in martini colours, green martini colours. I was there for that day, and that was quite memorable, very memorable actually. So yeah, I've always, and actually it's a circuit I visited for 67. I went there, first time I ever saw it. Came over as a kid from Australia. We had a couple of months in England, and I persuaded my mum to take me up there and also to go and see the Lotus factory. And we went to Snetterton, and Alan Rollinson was testing a Formula 2 Cooper. Amazing, huh? I'm not sure he ever raced. I suppose he probably did once or twice. I never really followed up on it, but I was just completely amazed that there was Alan Rollinson and there was this Cooper, and it had Cooper colours and everything. Formula 2 car. Amazing. Lovely. Paul Muscat. Stroll wants to dominate Formula 1. I presume you mean Lawrence there, but given the fact that if Adrian's going there, there's a good chance. I say, get ready. Lance Stroll could be world champion one day. Pucks82, Peter, given the latest rumours state Newey is not going to Ferrari, do you think Ferrari has the ability to build a winning car for Lewis and Leclerc by 26? You know what? I think they do. And everybody's we're all, including me, I've got to say, I've been banging on and on about the importance of where Adrian's going to go. We're all assuming that Adrian's going to do the same job on the 26 Aston, let's assume he's going there, as he has done on every other car he's ever done. And of course, that may not be the case, because as I said before, I don't think Adrian is a great fan of the 26 regulations and where they're going and what those cars are going to be like. And it's not as if he's a robot. He is a human being, and he's not 33 and hungry anymore. Yes, he's got a massive amount of knowledge and experience, and that the odds of him producing a bad car are almost zilch. But will he produce a car that's necessarily going to be better than the McLaren, the Ferrari, the Mercedes in this new 26 era? I wouldn't say the jury's out, but it's certainly a question that we all need to keep in the back of our minds, that it may not be quite as easy for Adrian to do what he does so well with the new regulations, bearing in mind it's the biggest change to Formula One's power unit in the history of the sport, in terms of going to 50% electrification, and how much of the architecture of the car then that defines. Yes, of course, there are still going to be aero details that Adrian's going to be absolutely amazing with, but I'm not sure the scope is as big as it was in his Red Bull era. That's all I'm saying. And I don't believe Mercedes will do a bad job on that 26 car, and I don't believe McLaren will. And don't forget, Aston Martin won't have Mercedes power unit. They'll be with Honda, which is okay, but don't forget that Honda were only able to get it together when Adrian and Red Bull got hold of them and married them to Red Bull powertrains, if you like, and got the methodology of that UK Milton Keynes harsh urban reality mixed with Honda's creativity and all the other stuff they can do so well. While they're at McLaren, they were completely lost, as were McLaren. And so we shouldn't assume that because Honda are doing so well with Red Bull at the moment, that they will be brilliant in terms of 26 and Aston Martin. They might be, and Adrian will probably be spending a lot of time making sure that that they are, and he will play a big role on the powertrain. But it may not be as easy for him because, he had Red Bull powertrains growing and basically being set up, and probably Aston Martin will do the same thing, Aston Martin powertrain or whatever, I guess. But bear that in mind as well. Natella Bra, hi Peter, do you think Williams will truly have a return to the front? How important was someone like James Vowles for Mercedes, and what can he do without the group, and can he really work a miracle? I have my doubts, to be honest. I've yet to be mega impressed by it all. I think Alex Albon's quick, and I think Carlos Sainz, who's now signed to go there, will do well in that he'll be there with Alex. I'm not sure he'll blow Alex Albon away, that's for sure. I think they're pretty similar in terms of pace. I think that's a problem for Carlos. And I think, Carlos has signed this weird contract where the minute there's an availability at Red Bull or Mercedes, I think it is, he can walk away from the Williams contract. That also brings with it a slightly weird relationship between the driver and the team in terms of confidentiality and information and working closely together in harmony. And I'd have to say here that I think Carlos has made a mistake, because I think he should have included, and this is on the assumption that what they're saying out there is correct, and I haven't actually heard this from Carlos myself, but if he has not included Ferrari in that, I think he's made a big mistake, because if it doesn't go brilliantly for Lewis, or if Charles has any sort of issues with the whole Lewis thing and gets a mega offer from another team, Ferrari are going to have a seat potentially as early as 27. And I'm surprised that Carlos doesn't think that he might want to go back to Ferrari in that situation. And I think Ferrari would make him an offer, because they know him, they know he knows the team, and they know how good he is. And if he hasn't included Ferrari out of sort of spite almost, I'd never drive for them again sort of thing, then I think he's making a mistake there. I may be misjudging that, and I really should reserve further comments until I know exactly whether or not he has included the Ferrari in that contract. But I have to say, it's a weird contract. I mean, the whole thing is weird, that Ferrari are firing a driver who's won a race for them this year, but they're firing him at the end of the year. And then the driver's going to another team and saying, yeah, okay, I'll drive for you, but if there's an option in 2 other teams, I'm going to take those maybe, and maybe I won't drive for you. It's just like, whoa, it's ridiculous, isn't it, really? So I don't really get that, and it's a funny thing. I mean, just speaking of management changes, we've also got Jonathan Wheatley leaving Red Bull to go to effectively to Audi, but running Sauber next year as team principal. That's a very, very powerful move, I think, by Audi Sauber, and he'll do well there. He's a very, very good guy, Jonathan Wheatley. I mean, he's learned from the best over the years, not necessarily just Christian, but also Adrian, and also he's just grown up organically with Red Bull, and he's done a brilliant job there over the years, behind the scenes a lot of the time. And he'll come into his own, I think. He's always wanted to do this, and he'll do a really good job at Sauber. So congratulations to him for that. Michael Lawless, do you think Stroll's aggressive results personality can mix with the more passive reserved style of Newey? Stroll seems impatient and volatile. I think we need to put a prefix here. Is it we talking Lawrence or Lance here? Because I think if you're talking about Lawrence, Adrian knows a little bit about him already because of the road car. So I think Adrian will be going in with his eyes open, and I think Lawrence on this occasion will realise that he's got this gem and he needs to treat him with respect and not shout and scream at him and let Adrian get on with it. So I think that's probably where they're at, but doesn't set itself up for the happiest of marriages in the history of happy marriages, does it? But I think they both know where they're coming from going into this relationship, and every time Adrian gets annoyed, maybe he just has to keep his mouth shut and look at his bank account, I guess, is the way that's going to have to go. Another super chat, thank you very much, Matthew Brown. I know we speculate a lot about this, but if Red Bull haven't gotten out of this performance slump that they're in by Zandvoort, then Max needs really to consider if Red Bull is where he truly wants to stay. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think, if Max is winning every race and everything's cut and dried and everyone's saying how boring Formula One is as a result, I think, he'd be saying, oh, well, who cares where Adrian's going? Red Bull's brilliant. But obviously now there are going to be more questions in his mind. I think he's a racer enough to know that for 25, the best option is to stay exactly where he is. Not that legally he could do anything anyway, but I mean, I suppose being Max, he could do whatever he wants, couldn't he, ultimately? But I think he'll realise that Red Bull will have momentum even to 25, and so it'll be close. I think, to be honest, I mean, I'm not going to say to be honest with you because that's a silly thing to say, but I think what I believe is that Max is above all a racer, and I think he actually quite enjoys the fact that he hasn't got a super dominant car, and in every race is a bit of a question mark now, and nothing is guaranteed. And I think that's going to bring the best out of him as we go into the second half of this year. So I think that's a good point. 26 is another matter. Whether he's thinking about the powertrain or doing a new car without Adrian. And that's what will be in his mind. And as I've said before on these live streams, the only answer to that question is to let 26 unfold and see what happens. So he can't really, because 26, Red Bull might do an amazing job. In Red Bull powertrain with Ford could be really strong, particularly with the management that they've got there now. Phil Prue, excellent guy, and he would know no more than you or I about how that car's going to be in 26, other than it's a pretty good chance it'll be pretty reasonable. So if the car is a complete dog, then he's got to think about 27 as the first opportunity to move and maybe do something, and that'll be based on who does a great job in 26 and what the driver situation is there. I mean, if it's Ferrari and Charles and Lewis have won 50% of the championship apiece, and one of them turns out to be world champion, it's going to be difficult for Max to go to Ferrari, isn't it? It's not going to happen. So if Mercedes have a very good car but very unreliable in 26, then that would be a good team to go to, because you'd have to assume they'd pick up reliability. McLaren, more difficult to see him going to McLaren because of Lando might leave, but yeah, maybe go to McLaren instead of Red Bull. I doubt it. So it's really only Mercedes, Ferrari, where they are and how they're going to go, and more chance that he might go to Mercedes, I guess. If if George Russell has a brilliant year in 26, wins the championship, has the best car, they're not going to sign Max, I don't think, to destabilise that. So that's not going to happen. It's, there aren't many, if you think about it, there aren't many ways Max could actually leave Red Bull anyway if he wanted to. How's he going to do that? Marcus Batty, how many Formula One guys tried WRC versus WRC back to Formula One, and how did they get on? Well, thanks for that. It's a lot of great drivers. I mean, Vic Elford is the standout Formula One driver who was brilliant in rallying as well. Sterling Moss too. Jim Clark, I guess, is the other one. So there's three very, very good drivers who did it. Back in the 60s we're talking about. In recent times, obviously Kimi went from Formula One to rallying and other stuff as well, and then back to Formula One. And I mean, he did well in Formula One on both occasions, but he didn't do that well in rallying. But I think that was a Kimi thing, more that he just didn't really want to listen to the navigator too much, the co-driver. It was like, let me get on and drive the car, as he used to say in Formula One. But that doesn't work in rallying, because even if you've got an amazing anticipation and feel, you're still listening to those pace notes coming through that you've specifically dictated to the co-driver or written with the co-driver, because it's got all your code words in it. And not code words, but words that you immediately understand. Like, is this corner absolutely flat in fourth if the road's going to get more rutty or not? And you have your word, whatever that is, soppy or whatever you want to say, that sums up the feel of the road at that moment. And the co-driver is completely in sync and using that word if the road's going down that way. And they're doing it 3 corners ahead about. So 2 to 3 corners ahead, depending on how quick that part of the stage is. So, if you can't adapt to that, you're starting way behind the 8 ball. And that's what Kimi was doing, I think. I know of one Formula One driver that has done some rally testing recently, not Max Verstappen, and in massive secrecy. And I would never betray that secrecy by telling you who it is, but he was good and did well. And I haven't spoken to Carlos Sainz about it much, but he does seem to have the Carlos Sainz senior flair, doesn't he, for just floating the car around and doing what he does with his car control. So, and are there any, Sebastian Loeb, for me, it was a great shame, in the true sense of the word, that Formula One didn't adopt Sebastian Loeb when he was ready to start crossing from rallying to circuit racing. And he wanted to do Le Mans, and he wasn't given a license in his first year. The super license thing is so ridiculous. And he kind of lost interest after that. Great shame, because he would have been absolutely superb, I think. And I have no doubt that, as I said before, I have no doubt that Thierry Neuveille, if his career had gone a different way and he got into F3, F2, I think he'd be right up there in Formula One. In a good team, he'd be winning Grand Prix. I think he's that good. And that's why I spent the time I did. And, obviously it was a massive, enjoyable thing to do, but it was completely and utterly relevant to everything we talk about on this channel anyway, to do with the way they drive the cars. And it was a different insight into how to do it. Kevin Pryor used to love the 555 blue livery in the late 90s. Yeah, David Richards and Colin McRae, the 555 Subarus. I remember actually chatting to David Richards when he was actually at the moment of deciding whether to go to gold wheels or not on that car. And, little things like that just, change it, don't they, forever. Still a classic. And it's great when you go to a rally and they've got lovely model shops and stuff. And they all have a lot of the old cars there. Even I found a Ford of America 63 Lotus Cortina in rally spec model. Just brilliant. Solido. Hi Peter, another Indian fan. More cricket questions probably. Do you think Liberty would invest in getting the Indian Grand Prix back as they did with Vegas? Well, I've talked about that, and I've talked about how absurd it is that we don't have more infrastructure development in the countries and the regions that are so important to Formula One. India, classic example. South Africa, another. and a lot of countries in Asia as well, and South America. And I've said several times that I think we should have a B division Formula One championship for these countries that are not on the A championship, but nonetheless would like to be and could be in the future. And we put all of the young talented drivers who don't have Formula One drives are in that championship, and they're racing, Formula One cars from 2, 3, 4 years ago, provided by the teams or sold by the teams. And I think it'd be a great championship. That's what I think Liberty should do. I also think, and I've said many times, and I produced a dossier about this thick, which I presented to Liberty when they first took over the commercial rights, that they should invest in a driver training program that goes through to at least to Formula 2 in all these important countries like India, like South Africa, like China, and other big economies. And that's what they should be doing, and producing a whole bunch of drivers from those countries, all of whom have amazing talent. Liberty aren't doing that. They're relying on the Guanajos to have both talent and money, personal money, to get them into Formula One. In other words, relying on the old Formula One system, which I personally don't think does a very good job. I'd love to see more talented drivers coming from, say, Indian karting, and then coming to Europe and on scholarships, getting through F4, F3, F2. And it's sad that, Daruvala, a very talented Indian driver, is doing, what is he doing, Formula E now, I think. He should be in Formula One. Anyway, getting back to it, and all that would mean if we had a lot of Indian drivers and all that going on, we would, of course, then be thinking of having an Indian Grand Prix. I don't think an Indian Grand Prix would succeed unless we had a couple of Indian drivers on the grid, is basically what I'm saying. So it's not just having the money to put on the race and make the modifications to the circuit and everything else that needs to be done now. So there you go. Robert Kubica, there's another one who did so well in rallying. This is from Trail Breakthrough. Yeah, I mean, that obviously left a bad taste in the mouth of all the Formula One team owners. Got to stop our drivers doing any rallying because it's so dangerous. Look what happened to him. And it's a shame, because Robert is a great guy, and he just loved going to rallies, just watching them, let alone driving in them. And he was at the point of having a massive amount of success in Formula One. Trailbreak 3 says Peter is Oliver said. That's right, Peter Selberg. Now, Peter Selberg, interestingly, has done several days of Rob Wilson and benefited. And I was chatting to Oliver about that in Finland. So there you go. And it was tarmac stuff, obviously, but Rob and Peter was saying, chatting to him about it when I spoke to Peter about it. He said, "Oh yeah, Rob was just transformed the way I drove on tarmac." And he also did another one. I think it was Juha Kankinen. He did some tarmac work with as well. Arnab Daz, who was the faster driver, Stewart or Lauda? Let's think about Nicky at his absolute peak in terms of pace. I'd have to say that was around, 84 he was brilliant, wasn't he, alongside Prost, as I said. And I think 75 he was outstanding as well. Stewart, I think Jackie had the edge. I think Jackie, if I think about watching Jackie, it was just like it was consummate perfection watching Jackie Stewart in everything he did in and out of the car. And in the car, he wasn't just going around scoring points. If it was a bad car, as the Tyrrell was in 72, he was absolutely, the BRM H16 was in 67. He was spectacular with a capital S. He was amazing. And I don't think Nicky would have driven a BRM H16 as well as Jackie did in 67. And I think Jackie would have driven the McLaren as well as Nicky did in 84 and the Ferrari in 75. That's not detracting from Nicky, but I think Jackie had a little bit of an edge in terms of just outright speed and ability to drive that car, to drive a bad car incredibly well. And Nicky drove the BRM beautifully in 73, though, having said all of that. That wasn't a great car, that 73 BRM on Firestones. It's very understeery, dodgy car. And Nicky was, that was probably Nicky at his absolute fastest. 73, 74 Ferrari with Luca. that was Nicky at his peak, I think. At 75, he started to become even better in many ways and winning races and championships, but a little bit more, you know, he had this thing about, he didn't talk in terms of 99% and whatever it was, you know, 100% maximum attack. I think by 75, he was sort of 90% was as much as he ever wanted to go. Whereas I'd say in 73, Nicky was 99.9 in that PRM. Yeah, I'd give it to Jackie at his peak. But it was close. I mean, Jackie also, let's think about Jackie was phenomenal in the wet too. Let's think of Nicky in the wet. I don't think he was Jackie in the wet. I don't think Nicky would have won the 68 Dutch and German Grand Prix the way Jackie did. Maybe, but he was, you know, these questions, if you have to choose one, it always makes the other look, you know, second rate. That's not the case. I mean, Nicky is still one of my great all-time heroes. Amy Newland, hi, casual IndyCar and Formula One fan here. Hope you enjoy the rallying is all I can say, Amy. Enjoy learning a little each livecast. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, and very kind of you to say that. And I, you know, rallying is something. I've just done that video. If you haven't seen it, I'll put it out as a separate thing on YouTube as well. But for me, that's part of it as well. That the level of the standard of driving of those WRC1 cars is unbelievably high. And I know that because I was talking to Max about it, and he was like completely in awe of them as well. Sheriff of Zandvoort, another question. Peter, what do you think of Renault stopping the engine for Formula One? Very sad news. Mr. LaRouche and Mr. Chevrier made a comment about it being a disgrace. Yeah, I think it's a classic Flav thing. I mean, we'll probably find that Flav's got some new engine that he wants to sell them, and they'll run that. Or they'll probably run a Merc or something, won't they? But it's a classic Flav thing. You know, simplify it all, get proper engine. I think it's Dennis Chevrier. I can imagine how sick he feels all those years, and I think he's right. I think it is. I mean, what's the point of Alpine, Renault doing Formula One without their own engine? There is no point. It's like Ferrari saying, "Oh, we give up now. We're going to run a Merc." A bit like Aston Martin saying we're going to run a Honda. Yeah, I think, you know, if you're going to be a car company, you have in the name of a manufacturer, you should do your own engine. Aston Martin shouldn't be doing a Honda engine deal. What's that all about? And Alpine shouldn't be doing anything other than Renault's. I totally get that. Daniel McCormick. Peter, can you put a word in with anyone you know in WRC to see if we can get a helmet cam, pedal cam? We'd love to see it in the sport. Oh, a helmet cam in WRC. Or do you want the pedal cam that WRC use in Formula One? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. I'm not a massive fan of the helmet cam, and I don't think it would work very well in WRC because they're moving around so much and there's so much vibration. I mean, a couple of times Terry was looking across at me just to make sure I had my hands tucked in either side, because he could quite easily, your arm could just fly up and go in front of his eyes and just, you know, obscure his vision for a millisecond. That's what he was concerned about. And so helmet cams wouldn't work. Pedal cam's pretty good, isn't it? That angle was, it's not the angle I would have 100% chosen, or I would have liked two cams, I guess, one on the throttle, one on the brake, but pretty good, you know, considering we have nothing from anyone else really. The Formula One version's not very good, and it's hopeless really, can't tell anything. And that's partly because there's no space in a Formula One car, and they refuse to design that into the regulations, even though I keep pushing for it. Every time they do new regs, they're doing new regs now, 26. I've been ringing up my engineer mates saying, got to get them to give more space so we can have a pedal cam. They don't do it, they never do it. And so yeah, you know, I hope I've kind of covered both sides of your question, because I'm not exactly sure what you mean. Okay, he's talking about danger now. Trail Break 3 says the Isle of Man TT is the most dangerous sport in the world. Yeah, well, I'm not out there looking for what is the most dangerous and wanting to do that. I'm out there looking for something completely different, which is looking to see how these unbelievably talented WRC1 drivers do their thing at the level that Thierry Neuveille does his thing, and to see the differences or the similarities between what we talk about on Formula One. That's why I did the rally. And as I said at the start of that video, I went to Portugal, and Neuville struck me as a sort of Lewis Hamilton type driver in terms of the way he does things, and for that reason I felt very confident about doing stuff with him. But I'm not there for an adrenaline rush in terms of danger. I'm there because I want to learn how they do it. Steve T, hi Peter, love your streams. Did you ever meet Ricciardo Rodriguez? Do you think of any stories about him? Thank you. No, sadly I didn't. He passed away in '62 Mexican Grand Prix non-championship race, driving a rented Rob Walker Lotus 24, and it was very sad. He'd had an amazing Grand Prix debut in the Belgian Grand Prix, points in his first race. Then he drove a fourth works Ferrari at Monza and was really quick. And then he was all set to be a full-time factory Ferrari driver for 63 and for 62. And he had that accident. Terrible. Yeah, sorry, I get that right. He drove 61. He drove it at Monza in 61 as a Ferrari, and he was all set. 62 had some very good outings, and then the accident happened. He was super quick. I never met him. I kind of asked Pedro Rodriguez for his autograph and saw him and watched him up close in 68, but I never obviously met Ricciardo because it was before my time. 62 we lost him, and he was just doing that non-championship race in Mexico because he was a Mexican Formula One driver, and they rented this car, and he just lost it going into the Peritella, the last corner, and the guardrail was at helmet height. Need I say more? Very, very sad. It was just like, it was a black day in Mexico, and for Pedro then to pick up the pieces and become the driver he did was amazing, actually. One of the models I did buy in Finland was actually a Pedro's 1970 Belgian Grand Prix winning BRM P153. But Ricciardo, he was the youngest guy to score points in Formula One. He finished fourth in the Belgian Grand Prix until Max Verstappen came. No, till Sebastian Vettel came along. So he held that for like 23 years or something like that, that record. Ricciardo was brilliant, really quick. Trail brake, rally drivers are insanely talented. They rely on a co-pilot. Well, they don't rely on the co-driver. And I can say that because Terry was still brilliant, even with me alongside him. No, they rely on to get to that level. Of course they do, but it's not reliant. It's just, totally. It's like a golfer with a caddy. I mean, no co-driver would like to be compared with a caddy, but I think we often underplay the role the caddy plays in golf, because not only has he got the yardages from when they move the pin position for the next day and the weather and the wind and everything else, not only do they do that for every shot, but they're also there saying to the golfer, no, you can do this. Take the risk. Go for it. You can do it. And things like that. And that's what, a lot of that is the role of the co-driver in rallying today. It's being very calm under pressure, and it's reminding the driver of what he needs to do and how to approach a situation. And he's just giving them a running commentary which is going through their brain. And obviously that's perfectly timed and in sync as well. But they don't rely on it as such. They are just immense talents in their own right, these drivers. So, yeah, next one. Okay, we're getting some good rally stuff here. Marcus Batty, shout out to Josh McAlean. Yeah, he's good. We watched him in WRC2, the Irish pair. Fabulous in the green. I think they didn't finish third in WRC2, but are really good in the Skoda. Yeah, he's teaching ice driving in Sweden. Less trees on a lake. Teammate to Ollie Solberg. That's right. Really good people. So, Sheriff of Zandvoort says, I can imagine Seb Ogier in a Formula One car. Yeah, well, I can too. I mean, he's very... he may well be. I see him as a sort of Nicky. Actually, I see him as a Nicky Lauda, and he would have been brilliant, absolutely. Ogier, I mean, I'm in awe of Ogier. Actually, I see him and I think, wow, Seb Ogier. I bet he get out of his way, and he drives so well too. I'm like that with all of them actually. Even somebody like Adrian Former, who's a young, cool, up and coming driver, supremely quick, very cool guy. And also Taka Katsuta, the other Toyota driver. He's not slow either. I mean, I think he does. I think he's, at least as good as Yuki Tsunoda. at least. Arthur Snedden, outstanding, great job. I think you're talking about the rally video there, which is great, because, a number of people came up to me in Finland, WRC people, couple of drivers, couple of navigators, co-drivers, sorry, I don't want to navigators, saying a couple of cameramen that I knew from Formula One who are working now at WRC, producing those amazing shots. Couple of them several would come up and say, Peter, can you try to get the message out about WRC? It is so good now. And Formula One is very, very difficult in terms of working and all the things I've been saying, doing interviews and we love Formula One, and we're not in any way detracting from Formula One and what it does. But WRC should be somewhere near Formula One, I think, in terms of the way people perceive it and the coverage it gets. It is that good. And everybody to whom I spoke that had worked in Formula One said that to me. They said, you've got to, Peter, do what you can. You've got to get... Even Cyril Ibert-Bull, who's team principal of Hyundai, was saying, Peter, please, got to get this message out. These cars are just amazing. You look, this is what Cyril was saying, agreed with me. Formula One cars look super quick. Rally cars, you look at them and you think, wow, cool livery or whatever you want to think, or that's like that guy's car down the road or whatever. But you get in them and they're just these rocket ships between the trees. They're just amazing. And I'm not talking about the danger. I'm just talking about the environment in which they look and work so well. And there's tremendous feeling of WRC is massively undervalued by the motorsporting world at the moment. And I think it is. I really do. Michael Delorso, would Aston Martin sabotage the other car to help Lance win if Newey builds a dominant car? Well, there's something else. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Fernando would have something to say about that. But I mean, imagine if Newey builds the best car by a mile in 2026 and it's a very easy car with which to win races. Fernando is not going to win every race, and Lance Stroll potentially could win some races. And I imagine the first time it happens, Fernando will say, oh, it's brilliant, I'm so happy, great team result, isn't it wonderful? But the fourth time it happens, he ain't going to be so happy, or even the second for that matter. It's not to say it will happen, but if the car's that good, he could, even Stroll could win Grand Prix and maybe even win a championship, for Pete's sake. Let's not say that too often. Adrian Newey to Williams, says Arthur Sneeden. Well, I don't think so. I think he's going to go, if he's going to go to one of those teams, not Mercedes or McLaren or Ferrari, I think he'll go to Aston Martin. That's where the money is. I just don't think there's no record of those guys who own Mercedes own Williams now spending massive amounts of money, is there? Because otherwise they would have had a spare chassis in Australia. Oops. Spectrum 4E4, Michael Delorso, don't forget Newey has also designed some bad car. Okay, all right, we've done that one. Alpha 007, it's insane when you are in a race car and you're still not moving and you put it in first gear. Thump, what a feeling. Yeah, it is. It is that. It's not glunk like that. And then, one of the most enjoyable bits of that, and I said it in the video, was when he said, oh no, now we have to charge the engine and the brakes. We turned left. And he was doing this, and everyone, everybody's watching all this, and the noise, he couldn't escape it. And the handbrake turn he did on that road. I mean, handbrake turns with the fly handbrake, presumably are not that difficult, but to do it as neatly and precisely as he does them was just poetry. And the noise, the sound, brilliant. Jonathan 14, Lewis was robbed 8 championships. Well, yeah, of course he was. He was robbed by a FIA race director making the wrong decision at the wrong time. Harvin Gwyn, in response to that chat we had about Daniel R earlier on, bit unfair, is a former driver who's still driving. He's irrelevant. Why aren't people telling him to get lost like they do to Checo? Well, because we're not all as hard-hearted as you, Harvin. I actually like Daniel a lot. I like Checo a lot. I think he's got great feel for loading up the loaded rear correctly. So do we want to get rid of that? And particularly, look at the amount of money he's brought to Red Bull to keep them at the level they're at. A lot of sponsors have come around Checo from Mexico. We shouldn't discount that either. That's a contribution to motorsport, if you like. For sure, that has accounted for quite a lot of jobs and stuff. And then Checo, he wasn't exactly slow in Spa. He wasn't great in the race, but he'll be building on that, and hopefully he'll be, thinking about how to do a decent job in the build-up to the Mexican Grand Prix this year. So, anyway, Marcus Batty says, Colin McRae set a top 10 quali time in the Jordan Formula 1 back in the day. Yeah, well, I think he did, didn't he? Yeah, I think he did. Yeah. The Jonathan 14, Peter is a goat. Oh, I think you mean that. That's a compliment. Okay, I'm very kind commentator goat. Thank you. Peace, everyone. Thank you very much. Balance the car with a foot brake, Arthur Sneeden. Yeah, well, that's what he was doing. And under throttle in air for weight transfer balance for landing really is insane. Yeah, I know. It was, and that landing is, I was absolutely staggered actually. I'm showing because I was slightly disorientated, because when you're not driving a road car to a location and the other person's driving and you're yakking away, which was the case going up to the start of that stage that I did, I had really no idea where we were. And we did the stage and everything else, and obviously I looked at the onboards and looked at that. There's a last big jump there, the sort of show jump. And when it was Saturday afternoon, and we were at the sort of one of the big stages of the Rally of Finland, which a massive number of people, I suddenly realised, that's the jump I was going over. And it was. That stage was part of the main stage that they used on Saturday. Not all of it. And some of it was the wrong way around, I think, as well. It's kind of confusing, but it was real stuff. I don't think there are any jumps in the actual rally that were higher than the one I did on my stage. So, wow. So there we go. Foon, change of tone here. I recently visited Charade in Clermont-Ferrand. What a beautiful track. Do you have any memories from there you could share? Thank you. I do. I loved Clermont-Ferrand. I was there in 72, the year Helmut Marko lost his eye. The year Chris Amon should have won in the gorgeous V12 Matra and didn't because he got a puncture. One of many drivers to get punctures in the race due to the flint and the little stones that were flying everywhere from the edge of the track. Jackie Stewart won the race. And he always annoyed Carlos Reutemann in the interview afterwards. Jackie at some point said something like, "Oh yeah, I drove around the stones, made sure I didn't get a puncture." And Carlos thought, yeah, right. And so when Carlos won the 75 German Grand Prix, similar race, a lot of punctures going on. The first thing Carlos said when he got out of the car, he said, "I drive around the stones. I get puncture. I no get puncture. Just like Jackie." Yeah, Clermont was a lovely race. Loved it. A little paddock area just below the pit straight and on the grass. McLaren M19s, Yardley McLarens, Peter Revson, Denny Holm. Smell of Yardley aftershave. Also the smell of horse manure, because that was the first big race for Marlboro in Formula One with their 5-car BRM team. They'd been around since the Spanish Grand Prix in that sort of setup, but this was the first time they really did it big, and they had this stagecoach with the Marlboro man and the horses on the grid. You can imagine all mayhem broke loose when that happened. No more stagecoaches on the grid. Forget about the grid girl for controversy. At the time, it was, should we allow stagecoaches and horses on the grid? So yeah, Clermont was good. It was a wonderful circuit. It's also the place where Patrick Depailler broke his legs hang gliding, wasn't it, around there? Because he was from Clermont, and he was hang gliding one day and broke his legs on that. It's a beautiful place to hang glide. And so it was... the other memory, of course, is the 65 French Grand Prix at Clermont, where I wasn't present. You fly into Clermont Airport. It's a lovely little airport there. And that was the race that Jim Clark dominated from start to finish. Jackie Stewart second, the two flying Scotsmen first and second. But it was also the race where, when Jimmy arrived with Colin Chapman and Mike Spence in the private aircraft on the Thursday before the race, that they got to the airport, got into the terminal. There's a big crowd of people at the other end of the terminal, and Jimmy wandered up to see what it was all about. And it was Yuri Gagarin, the Russian cosmonaut, who was on a world tour at that point, and that was where he was at that point of his world tour, is at Clermont-Ferrand in France, and he was going to do a cocktail party appearance thing that night, and all the photographers there. So Jimmy sort of looked at him, and Yuri Gagarin recognized Jim Clark and said, Clark, the driver. And they sort of embraced, sort of thing, as they did in those days. Well, they shook hands probably. And anyway, cut a long story sideways, Yuri invited the entire Lotus contingent to this event that night to hear him. He didn't really speak, I don't think. I think it was just sort of, here is Yuri Gagarin, bit of film, photos probably, signing autographs and stuff. But anyway, Chapman was there, Mike Spence, Jimmy, and they're all there. And so the story goes, there were a few glasses of wine consumed. And anyway, that night, Colin realised they needed to get up to the track. So they left in Colin's rental car, Jimmy, Mike Spence, Sally Stokes, and Colin, to go to Clermont to drive up from the town to the hotel. And Colin lost the lot, as he would, and as he did periodically, and went down an earth bank or did something. And Sally, no seatbelts, I don't think, and Sally cut herself reasonably badly, and Jimmy fainted at the sight of the blood. None of them were seriously injured, but Jimmy fainted actually. And anyway, that was all sorted out in the end. And then Jimmy went on to win the French Grand Prix that weekend. So there you go, Clermont. Murderer says, man, I would love it if you took us through the pole laps. I think what you mean is we did the same thing that we've just done on that stage for a pole lap. Wouldn't it be great if we had that footage? Wouldn't it be great? And not only the footwell, but also, of course, in Formula One, everything is so compact in the cockpit and the gear changing and everything else. You can't see anything either, really. And even all you can see with the onboard, really, is just the display on the dash and the road ahead, or the low down one of the road where you can't see anything anyway. But in rallying, you got that space, and they use it incredibly well with those cameras. They do a brilliant job, WRC, with that, Red Bull, with that photography. And yes, we have it in other forms of motorsport, but it's more, crash bang, passing, overtakes. It's not the art of balancing a car, a four-wheel drive car on gravel. It's not that, and how to use the brakes and the throttle to get it perfect. It's not that. And that's the only place you can get that is WRC. So, ready for the Latifi announcement. What's that? Williams driver, or what? What he's going to be doing. Anyway. David Oliver is the only world champion kart driver to run a Formula... Oh, Oliver, okay. Oliver Oakes, okay. Oliver Oakes, David Oliver. David says Oliver Oakes is the only world champion kart driver to run a Formula One team. There you go. Very good. He's a good racer, actually. Very good racer. Formula Renault. He's just a good bloke, Ollie Oakes. He's a really good bloke. I love hanging out with him, and everything about him is just cool. He's a great guy. Alpha 007, I love Snetterton, even though when it's on the calendar in iRacing, everyone hates it. Participation is low, really. Just says a lot about the people in iRacing, doesn't it? What can you say about that? It's nothing to do with Snetterton. I think I've got another super chat up here. So I've done that one. I'm just going to have a look up the top here. I think I saw another one come up. What's that one? You've done the Daniel Ricciardo one. No, there was nothing more. I thought I saw something. See, my management team on this are saying to me, maybe you should get rid of this business of putting the question up and just go to the standard YouTube chat feed, because it's much easier there to identify the super chats and things. But I've looked at it, and I kind of like the way it comes up. I don't be interested to get people's input on that, but I think the way the questions come up and how it looks on screen actually works quite well. Alex Beek, hi Peter, is Lawrence Stroll going for straight flush? Money, Newey, Verstappen, Honda, what do you think? No, I don't think at this stage he's thinking Verstappen. I think he's organised enough to think Newey, got to get Newey, and then we'll see where it goes, and see how Fernando is in a couple of years, and how quick he is, and how long he wants to race for, and then we'll see who's going well at that point. And it may not be Max, at that point it might be Oscar Piastri that he wants, or somebody like that. I mean, the odds are he's not going to want anybody who's going to upstage his son too much, because he wants his son not only to win Grand Prix, but also to be world champion. He really believes he has the talent, I'm sure. So that's ultimately what this is all about. Have no doubt about that. Paul Muscat, Lawrence Stroll has the money and he's using it. Yep, he is for the Newey thing. AM, don't think Newey was ever going to Ferrari. It was fans wanting him and Hamilton to be in the same team. Yeah, well, we'll see. Kevin Pryor, hello all. We are missing the German Grand Prix. I agree, missing the French Grand Prix as well. It's completely wrong. When you think of the importance of those countries in the history of Formula One, even before Formula One was invented, going back to prior to 1950, how important Germany and France have been in the history of our sport, it's ridiculous that we don't have German and French Grand Prix. And guess what? WRC does have a round in Germany. It's not actually the German round. It's the West European round, or East European, whatever. It's European round, I think. But they have 2 mega stages in Germany. They all stay in Germany. So there you go. Saraba Duby. What do drivers and teams mean when they say a corner, sector or circuit is technical? Aren't most things technical anyway? Absolutely. Very good point. And I'd like to add another phrase, and I think I used it, so I'm guilty of it as well. There's a phrase that really annoys me called, he's carrying a lot of speed. I mean, what does that mean? What does that mean? He's going quickly? Too quickly? I don't understand what it means, carrying speed. It's just something that's grown up. Well, he's carrying a lot of speed through there. What's it mean? It's quick. Anyway, going back to your point, technical. Yeah, I agree with that comment. I don't understand what that means. To me, it started in downhill skiing, and particularly the slalom downhill, slalom rather than downhill, I think. No, they mention it in downhill as well, when sometimes they say, it's quite a technical run. I think it means it's not a quick corner where a driver can sort of take command and is slightly more important than the car. I think it means it's a corner that's so slow and boring that if the car isn't quick, you've got no chance of doing anything about it. I think that's what it means. I think that's how it started anyway. Nowadays, it might mean it's a slow corner where you've got to make 27 diff adjustments mid-corner in order to get it absolutely perfect. So it's very technical. Or something like that. I agree with you. It's rubbish. It's complete rubbish. They're all technical. It's a technical sport. It's 60% car, 40% driver. Kevin Pryor, how quickly will Newey turn Aston Martin into a world championship winning team? Well, I think it all starts in 26 onwards. And potentially that for the new regs, it'll be. But as I say, it's power unit as well, 26. So it's not as if it's just Adrian coming in and doing his aero thing. He's coming in to do a complete car, I guess. He will have some impact in 25. I'm not quite sure how much time he'll be on with the team that year, but next year. But I think the 25 car will definitely benefit from a few things that Adrian will see that he doesn't like, a few gaps here, a few angles that aren't right. Adrian getting paid 100 million a year. Yeah, I see that. Somebody quoted that. I mean, that sounds like a pretty round number that somebody has just guessed behind their laptop, putting it out on the internet. It doesn't sound right to me. I would have thought it'd be a lot more than that. And I imagine there's a lot more in it in terms of bonuses and shares as well. It just seems too round a number to me to be right. Sorry, I don't go along with all this talk. Why would Adrian tell anybody what he's being paid, and why would Aston Martin tell anybody what they're paying Adrian? It just wouldn't happen. So it's just what somebody out there in the Ethernet has thought is a good number. MacKurt, Peter, will the maximum allowed engine parts play a role in the championship race between Verstappen and McLaren? I don't think so. I think you mean, in terms of grid penalties and having to do this. No, the Red Bull are organised enough and have got enough history of reliability with this. For sure, McLaren are going to have to take hits in the back half of this year, for sure, and Red Bull probably will as well. So it's just a question of doing it at the right place at the right time. And if you look at Max taking that hit in Spa, didn't work out too badly for him, did it? If you take a 10 place hit in Baku, that's bad. Kevin Pryor, do you think Alonso will get his third world title because of Newey? I can't answer that. I'd say no, but I think Newey's first car, i.e. the 26 car, will for sure not be a bad car, and Fernando's still mega quick, so he'll win Grand Prix. I think that's a good question to answer. Will Fernando win Grand Prix with Newey? Yes. Championship? Difficult, I think, for Fernando to win another championship. The car's got to be, Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren have got to be way off target in 26 to win a championship. He'll win races, I think, but not a championship. David, love this broadcast, but also love the hard compound broadcast. So will you finish by 20 GMT? Well, I don't think I have I? Sorry about that, mate. Why is Daniel Ricciardo doing so badly? Well, because we talked about that a bit earlier, so, refer to that. He's just, all the little things you've got to do and put together don't really work for the way Daniel drives and the way his psyche is these days. Red Bull organisation, are the wheels coming off? Easy to say that. Easy to say, Newey leaving, Perez drama, Max may leave. Now Jonathan Wheatley leaving, other engineers have left, good people. Red Bull, different time of their life in terms of the company and the family and the shares. But no, I think it's still basically a very, very good team with some very, very strong building blocks around which they operate. And I don't think so, no. I think it's still going to be a very strong team. The only thing that could happen is that Red Bull may decide they've had enough and pull out of the sport. Well, that was always going to happen. The same way Lawrence Stroll could decide tomorrow he's not going to do it anymore. It's always a risk when the team is owned by somebody who's mass putting. But having said that, Christian's done a pretty good job of building up a commercial infrastructure around the team. Sergio Perez sponsors being a good example, but others too, to make it less dependent on Red Bull. And I think they could survive it reasonably well if Red Bull announced, say, in 3 years' time they're pulling out of Formula One. I think the team would still be able to continue pretty effectively. So, AM says, I think the reason Newey hasn't gone to teams like McLaren is that they've already have people that are good technical and that it would be too many cooks in the kitchen. Yeah, maybe. But I think... something about Honda, Peter, not quite sure what that means. But you could argue the same thing about Aston Martin. They've got good people and they've got, I don't know, it depends. Adrian's difficult to go to a team which is doing reasonably well. Adrian, that's why he loved going to Red Bull, because it was growing organically from the ground up, basically. Michael Delorso, do you coach your son in golf? Well, no, we have a very good pro that we work with here in Spain. And Jack does a lot. He does once a week with him. And I'm always there. And I'm a bit like a sort of co-driver, if you like, because I'm picking up keywords and key things that we're working on. And I work out a program of how we work on those in a fairly systematic, sort of, hopefully, Formula One style way. And it seems to work pretty well. And Jack, he's only 12, so it's not as if, he's not as if he's a pro, but anything. But he reacts to that very well because he knows exactly what he's got to do next and what he's working on. And he's very good at focusing on one thing at a time and making it work. NASA says, I asked a super chat, but it went away. I think I just wanted to ask about the differences in driving skill between Formula One and Rally and which one is more difficult in your opinion. Thanks. Sorry if the super chat went away. I thought I saw one. That's right. And that's not up there now. I don't know why it went away. Very annoying. But thank you, and I'm glad you didn't have to spend any money. Well, obviously when you take two different paths, you're going down a racing path towards Formula One and you're going down a rallying path towards WRC1. There are so many other factors involved in terms of the logistics, the travel, the car you're driving, working with the people you're with, the goals that you're trying to achieve at the end of any given day, that they very quickly separate. And for a rally driver suddenly get into a Formula 2 car or vice versa would be very, very difficult. But the basic core skill at the beginning of that split, I think, is very, very similar, as I tried to show in that video. It's all about touch and feel and releasing the brake pedal pressure at exactly the right rate and feel for the corner, what you can do with that corner, how you can extend the straights, and that applies in rallying as well. So all of that is the same. But in terms of which is more difficult, I couldn't say. I can tell you rallying is more dangerous, that's for sure. And that might therefore make it more difficult in the eyes of some. But in terms of technique, I think it's pretty similar. You know, I think if you asked Thierry Neuveille to get into a Red Bull Formula One car and do some donuts and do some clever stuff, he'd be able to do that in an hour. I would have thought he'd be right on top of it. And if you asked him to go and if you gave him a day at Barcelona testing, I think he would be. It's if you gave him 3 months at Red Bull doing sim work and building up in a logical way, and then you did a 3-day test of an F2 car or an F1 car, I think he'd be pretty much there. I don't think he'd be that far away. But you just can't jump from one car to another. And any more than Max could jump into a Hyundai i20N Rally 1 and be mega quick on the Rally of Finland. He wouldn't. You know, he'd probably go off in the bit like Elfyn Evans, sadly, went off in the first corner of the second last stage. Left-hand kink. He just wanted to score maximum points on Super Sunday and just lost it. And I said to Terry, I said, was that flat? Is that flat, that? And he said, no, what it is an important place to get the revs very high for more power on the straight afterwards. And he just went in slightly too quickly and just went boom like that and he was off. And Elfyn Evans is a seriously good driver as well. So Darwin Lee, this whole live stream needs to be about Lewis Hamilton being the greatest Formula One driver in history. Really? I think you're probably being very kind, and I would love to do one like that. And we could even probably get Lewis to come and chat at some point. But I love chatting about lots of things. And driver in history, well, Jim Clark. Sorry, excuse me. Ramali Kala. Hi, Peter. Apologies for derailing, but could you talk about the 99 European Grand Prix and the scandal? Well, trying to think. Oh, yeah. I think it's another subject for another day, to be honest. I'm just suddenly looking at the clock. My wife's just said, are you having dinner or not? So can we bring that up next time we come into it? And because, what I do know from Johnny Williams, and I'll just tell you this, he was in what was he doing? I think he was he had to go to the Ferrari motorhome after the race, and something to do with a cap or something, I think, not to get it signed, but something to do with Jacques. And Michael was there, and he said Michael was completely chilled and relaxed, and there was no essence of, I've just done an incredibly stupid thing, or that was all Jacques' fault, it was nothing to do with me, or I've been robbed, I should have. It was just like, oh, well, that was motor racing, let's move on. And he was just completely chilled about it. And Johnny was telling me about this recently, and he said, he was amazed that Michael was like that. And he thought, in a way it says a lot about Michael, that he just completely switched off and he was completely back to normal. I think that's what you're talking about, right? You're talking about Michael losing the points, but it didn't affect the championship at all. He was disqualified from the Drivers' Championship, wasn't he? And when Michael spoke about it with the passage of time, he said that he grew up in an era of these sorts of things happening in football, and Ayrton Senna, and all these things were always there as things that occasionally he, was guilty of doing too. But it was part of motor racing. That's how he, I think, justified it. Not justified it, but I think it's how he rationalised it. Of course, the other scandal was that it was the first time David Coulthard had been told to finish second to Mika Häkkinen. And that was the writing on the wall for him. He then gave the Australian Grand Prix to Mika on a plate when he was leading because Mika had misheard a pit stop. And David, true gentleman that he is, gave the win back to Mika Häkkinen, which I don't think many other drivers would have done. And I mentioned that in that piece I did after the Hungarian Grand Prix with Lando. But I think that was also, I was quite close to David at that point, and I don't think he was very comfortable about that race in terms of the politics at McLaren. But he had to do it, really. That was it. He was that sort of guy. So, yeah, weird, that whole thing, wasn't it? You're talking about 99, are you? Sorry, that was 97 I was talking about. 99, what are we talking about with 99? That was the year of Michael's broken leg. Sorry, what was that all about then? 99 European Grand Prix, what was that? Can't even remember what that race was. Let me have a look. See, I've been doing it too long now. See, I've been doing a live stream for, 2.5 hours almost. F1 European Grand Prix. What was it? Nürburgring. Was that the race that... Who won that? Was that the Johnny Herbert? Was that the Johnny Herbert win? Oh, the race that nobody wanted to win. Why was that a scandal then? I don't understand. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, podium. Johnny Herbert, yeah. Why was that a scandal? I don't remember why that was scandalous. I remember I was there, and I remember Johnny did a very good job of looking at the direction of the flags and knowing that the rain was going to come when it did and the direction that it was coming from, and he was really on top of it and drove really well. Ralf Schumacher could have won that but went off, didn't he? In the Williams. Who else? Why was that a scandal? I remember afterwards Phil Collins in the Stewart motorhome. That was pretty good. Yeah, and Jackie. The irony of Johnny winning it and not Rubens. Bearing in mind Rubens had, led races. Anyway, yeah. I thought that's a scandal. Maybe I'm missing something here. Ask the question next time we do a live stream. I'm a bit confused about that one. Michael Dill also says, I like the layout of Ricciardo, but it needs gravel and looks horrible on TV with all that red and blue striping. Yeah, it's a bit too many fences there as well, sort of, wire fences. When you go there as a spectator, there's wire fences and gravel everywhere. It's not it should be lots of grass and nice white fences, beautiful. I agree with you, it's become a bit barbed wire-ish, probably all since Bernie had it, I imagine. Stop all the people coming in to watch the racing. So anyway, I'm going to have to wind it up now, guys. You've been all very good. And just reading through these other ones, but lots of people chatting amongst themselves, and I've had a great time on this one, I must say. It's been brilliant chatting with you guys, and I hope you enjoyed the live stream as well, because it's been it's fabulous to talk about rallying when you don't know where it's going, whether people really like it or not. And I hope my enthusiasm has come through on that. So big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, to Track Ninja, to you, the fans, and I'll do another live stream probably before the Dutch Grand Prix, in the week of the Dutch Grand Prix, I think. So I'm going to end with another little snippet from Finland that you might enjoy, and so that's coming up now. So until then, take care and enjoy the August break, if you're having one, and if you're not, enjoy it anyway.
Peter, tell us about your experience.
It was like being with an artist, just watching it unfold. Absolutely superb in every detail. Whether the way he was slowing the car, the jump, the acceleration, the control. Twice I thought we nearly lost it, and he hadn't. He was just doing what he does. Just, to feel how quick it is going sideways is the greatest feeling in motorsport, I think.
Is it one of the most impressive things you've experienced?
Oh, absolutely. I actually was lucky enough to drive with Hannu Mikkola in a Quattro once, and I've driven with Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, many great drivers. This guy is absolutely right up there. I wish he'd do Formula One.